Welcome to the Complete Street Commission's December 14th regular commission meeting. This is a hybrid meeting with commission members, city staff, and members of the public participating in City Hall in accordance with public health guidelines for in-person meetings and participating remotely to promote social distancing in this federal, state, and local emergency. I would like to introduce Complete Streets Commission members and city staff present. I'm Chair Sally Cole, and commissioners present include Brian Ottman, Katie Baruzzi, Vice Chair Jackie Sebrian, Elizabeth King, and Christopher Coleman. Commissioner absent includes J.K. Jensen, and city staff present includes Kevin Chen. Kevin, would you please provide instructions to the commission and members of the public on how the meeting will proceed?
Yes, thank you very much, Madam Chair. So if you give me 1 second, pulling up my notes. Okay, great. So thanks again, Chair Cole and member of the Complete Streets Commission. Welcome everyone to the December 14 Complete Streets Commission meeting, and thank you for attending. So at this time, we ask that members of the commission to please remain on the screen for the duration of the meeting. If you're attending by Zoom, you'll control your own webcam and microphones. Staff will engage webcams and microphones to make presentation and respond to members of the commission or the public if necessary. For members of the public that wish to provide public comments for any of the items on tonight's agenda, if you're in attendance, obviously make sure that you let me know. There's a comment card, if you can fill that out, and then you can speak afterward. After the chair calls for the public comment on the item, virtual attendees can engage the raise hand feature. If you're calling from the landline or cell phone, do press 9 to raise your virtual hand. And of course, like I say, if you're participating in person, then obviously you can just get our attention. That would be good enough for us. Please do wait for the chair to call your name, and then you can step up and then speak at that time. Okay, so that concludes my instruction, and I return the meeting back to the chair.
All right. Under reports and announcements, city staff and commission members may communicate general information of interest regarding matters within the jurisdiction of the commission. No commission discussion or action can occur on any of the presented items. Kevin, do you have any reports and announcements?
Yes, I do. Thank you very much, Madam Chair. So just a quick couple announcements about city council actions and some of the elections that have taken place recently. So as you know, city council member Nash got reelected for district number 4. So essentially we now have, again, 5 of the same city council members. Also, we now have a new mayor for next year. New mayor for next year is council member Jen Wallison, and the vice mayor would be council member Cecilia Taylor. And then of course, with council member Mueller moving on to the supervisor role, our goal is to accept applications until December 20th. And then hopefully with that, we have candidates, and the city council will select a replacement to replace the remaining 2 years of his term. So if any of you that know people from District 5 that wants to be a council member, definitely encourage them to apply. So, so that's in terms of the city council, in terms of some of the movements that have been going on thus far. In terms of projects, 2, I want to highlight. One is that we have officially got the approval for the Willow Village project. So there's a very exciting, a very big endeavor that took years to get to this point. There are 2 critical timelines I do want to highlight. One is that with some of the negotiations that took place, the grocery store construction is anticipated to begin in 2025. So so there's a little bit of a push up for the construction of the grocery store. So that's kind of nice to hear. In terms of the overall project, though, it is expected to be completed by 2029. So of course, everything is tentative. Obviously, if all goes well, that's the schedule. But we all know how construction timeline goes, right? So, The second project is the local roadways, local road safety plan. So we did get the city council's blessing on the agreement, which we have since, I believe, executed and started the project going as well. Later on, when we do the major project update, I will also give you a quick update on that project because we are moving forward with that as well. The plan is to complete the plan by 2023, and obviously we'll be coming back to the commission in between those times for the local safety plan. So with that, I will conclude my announcements. Thank you.
All right, I guess commission members don't have any reports and announcements. We'll proceed. All right, under public comment, members of the public may address the Complete Streets Commission on any subject not listed on the agenda. Each speaker may address the commission once under public comment for a limit of 3 minutes. You are not required to provide your name or city of residence, but it is helpful. The commission cannot act on items not listed on the agenda, and therefore the commission cannot respond to non-agenda issues brought up under public comment, other than to provide general information. Kevin, can you please call for general public comment?
Absolutely. So at this point, just a reminder that this is public comment period for items not on the agenda item. So if you plan to speak for the MPCC parking management plan tonight, that will be later on. And just for everyone on the Zoom call, if you'd like to speak up right now, you can engage the raise hand feature. If you're calling in from the landline or cell phone, do press the 9 to raise your virtual hand. I do see one hand by Rob Jordan. So Rob, I am going to turn on your mic or allow you to speak, and then I'm going to engage the 3-minute time clock. So Rob, can you hear us?
Yes, I can.
Awesome.
Can you hear me?
You are good to
Yes.
go. Thank you.
Okay. Well, good evening, and thanks for the chance to comment. I'm the father of 2 children in the Los Lomitas district, and bike and walking safety has been a significant issue for both the elementary school and the middle school, Los Lomitas and La Entrada. And some time ago, the county did what I think is a good thing and put in a contraflow bike lane on Altschul Avenue from Abbey Avenue going back towards the elementary school to Camino a los Cerros. I see in the city transportation master plan that there is it includes a project to consider essentially continuing this bike lane on the city part of Altschul Avenue. So that would be Altschul Avenue between Abbey and Sharon Avenues. That's on page 309 and 339. It's project 138. And I just would urge the city to do whatever possible to prioritize that when it comes time to goal setting at the beginning of the year. I see it as a really essential way to complete a good step towards really significant safety improvement, particularly for the kids at the La Entrada Middle School. My kids are not there yet, but I certainly am concerned for the kids who are there now and ride their bikes every day and they go from a bike lane on Altschul Avenue, and then all of a sudden it kind of stops once they cross Abbey. And as far as coming home, I see lots of kids going, of course, the wrong way down Altschul, which is a one-way street at that point. So anyway, just a plug for prioritizing that contraflow lane to continue all the way down the length of Altschul Avenue. I just think it would be a great safety improvement for kids who are biking to school. And I appreciate your time and effort.
Rob, thank you for the comment, and thank you for the very specific information you provided. I just have one clarifying question. When you describe the contra bike lane that exists on Altschul now, can you give the cross streets again from where to where? Just want to make sure I know.
So
From AB
Oh, is it
Development.
only from Valpo? Okay,
I
sorry,
mean,
my wife is
it's-
correcting me.
It's from AB Developer. Yeah,
Yeah,
I
it's from-
actually talked to the county about getting that done a couple of years ago because of.
So if it, okay, I'll share.
I'm very familiar with this project.
Yeah, I know that street well. Okay.
Instigated it.
All right. Well, thank you, Rob. Thanks very
Thank
much.
you so much. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Actually, can I ask a
Oh,
question?
yes, go ahead.
Sorry about that, because we're not allowed to discuss this because it's agendized, but if we
Right.
could ask staff clarifying questions, maybe.
Yeah.
Okay, so Kevin, I remember talking to the county about this project because of what I had seen in the transportation master plan.
Right.
And I was surprised by how quickly they were able to do that, that project.
Mhm.
And I am curious, typically when the city is prioritizing different things, it sometimes has to do with when we're repaving.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering if we have an imminent repaving of Alt Shul or anything like that that could trigger this project getting done.
Sooner. Not at the moment. So,
Do
yeah,
you know when
so,
it's coming up in the repaving schedule?
I only know the repayment schedule for this year, unfortunately, but I can look into that. I think some of the challenges that because we did look at the project
Yeah.
specifically, and thanks for identifying the number and even the location.
Actually, that was Rob Jordan.
Right, yeah, that was
yeah.
really helpful in terms of setting up the framework. So yeah, so basically one of the challenges that we're gonna have when we get to that project is that we only have about 20 foot of curb we essentially have 20 foot to work with, which is perfectly fine with a bike lane and a travel lane, perhaps even a contraflow bike lane, which is one of the reasons why we even have it in our TMP to begin with. But there will be some coordination that we need to do with the school about some of the drop-off activities that are occurring over there and how that works. So, but to answer your question though, it's not something that we have in our pavement program for the time being, at least for next year. I'll look into the next couple of years to see if we have that information available, and I can follow up with commission offline. But I think one of the key points that the speaker touched on is doing the city council priority goal setting time. That would be a good opportunity for the commission or maybe individually for any one of you to kind of speak up and see if there's a desire to bring that to the forefront of the priority list.
Also seems like something, I don't know if Rob Jordan is still watching, but this seems like something to bring up in the Safe Routes meeting, because I don't know who's currently representing the Las Colinas School District in that task force.
Right.
But understanding from the school's perspective what their current Safe Routes plan looks like and what they were thinking independently of this would be helpful.
And if Rob doesn't know, the meeting is tomorrow
Right.
at 9 a.m.
Yep.
And I guess he can reach out to us or Las Colinas to find out that call-in number.
Yeah, no, definitely. And there'll be opportunity in the future to be in a
And
meeting, but
isn't
you're
the-
right, there is a meeting tomorrow for the Safe Route Task Force meeting.
Isn't the stretch he's talking about the last stretch to the
Yes.
school? So is there any jurisdiction that Lantrada could have in that?
No, it's completely in our right of way,
Okay.
where the county stop is essentially the boundary between the county and the city. So that the stretch that Rob is talking about is entirely within the city's right of way.
Yeah, it's just the most important stretch of the kids getting to school.
I feel like
It's also a
this was-
downhill, right?
This
Isn't
was
it?
such a bait and switch because I saw that in the TMP and I contacted the county and I said, hey, FYI, Willow Park's gonna be doing a bike lane and we wouldn't want it to dead end and be a bike lane to nowhere in the county.
Yep.
And so the county was like, you're right, we wouldn't. So the county went ahead and built their segment. The city's just like, sometime in the next 5 or 10 years, maybe we'll get to it. So,
I mean, the ball
anyway.
fields start
that's
right there,
really-
everything
I know.
starts right
Yeah,
there.
yeah, that's a pretty key
It's,
node.
yeah, so we shouldn't talk about it more
Right,
probably,
right,
but
right, that's correct.
But
Yeah.
I definitely appreciate Rob Jordan
comment, yeah.
elevating that.
Yeah,
for-
that was very
for
helpful.
us.
Yeah.
Okay, good. All right, then, thank you. Any more public comment?
Give me 1 second here. I am not seeing any hands
So
raised.
what's the
so-
follow-up action on that? Sorry. What's the follow-up action on this comment? What do we do next or if anything?
So I think for me specifically, I can go back and check our pavement schedule for the not this coming year, but maybe the 2 years from now to see if there's an opportunity. But then beyond that, that would be kind of what Rob touched on, which is kind of pushing the city council on doing their priority to see if that can be.
And also, I suggest that you attend the meeting tomorrow.
Well, I think
yeah.
I'm attending the meeting
Yeah,
term.
right,
And so we can elevate that. There were a couple of things on the elevation.
Yeah,
Sure.
it's always, exactly, it's always helpful to kind of have the proper stakeholders.
So we can put those in
talking.
the meeting notes and get a follow-up on it.
Right, yeah, and Rob, I think Rob is more than welcome to contact, yeah, I think as you're seeing, yeah, it's more than welcome to contact the city and we can kind of follow up with information about the task force meeting. It is online. The meeting information is available online. Rob, if you can attend tomorrow morning, but I think there will be future opportunities to attend as well.
Actually, one of the things that I was thinking about when Brian spoke was, what is the timeframe? Because I know it didn't occur last year due to COVID, I believe, but what's the timeframe for us to weigh in and give our opinion to the council around the priorities for the year?
Typically, it's like late January, early February, and typically what I'll do is, once it's agendized, I'll kind of do my usual email blast to the commission about, council items, and then I'll highlight that it's the goal-setting meeting for you
Okay.
guys to know, and then, of course, you as residents can go and speak on your behalf as well.
Okay,
Mhm.
all right.
Actually, one more question. How would this interface with the local road safety plan? Is there like is that an opportunity to elevate some of these safe routes, things that people are asking about?
It's
Not
certainly
really.
something we can explore.
Yeah.
Right now, I don't know if I can necessarily speak to how the two can
Right.
interconnect, given that the local safety plan is kind of meant to be like a citywide,
Yeah.
looking at some of the focus, maybe high intensity areas.
Mhm.
I don't know exactly where this falls
Yeah.
within the grand scheme of things here,
Yeah.
so,
Mhm.
yeah.
Right, we'll move on then. Under regular business, the commission considers recommendations from city staff on policy matters or administrative actions that require commission approval. The one regular business item tonight is accept the complete streets minutes from November 9th meeting. Do any commissioners have any clarification from the commission before I take public comments on the minutes? No clarification, right? Kevin, can you call for public comments at this time?
Absolutely. Thank you, Madam Chair. So again, anyone in attendance, if you'd like to provide public comment on agenda item, regular business item E1 on the meeting minutes, you can please go ahead and raise your hand if you're attending virtually, or press 9 if you're calling from a landline or from a cell phone. Go ahead and maybe give it a minute, see if
Just
anybody.
give me 10 seconds.
And this is usually a hot item. for
See,
people.
right. If I don't have a comment, then probably, usually I'm like, wait a minute, there's
I
one
think
thing.
I'm seeing none, so we can go ahead and close. public
All right.
comment
Put that on
period.
my future
Okay.
goals list.
Do I have a motion and a second to accept the minutes of the November 9th meeting?
I have a comment.
Yeah, absolutely.
You guys, I think Sarah Fernandez's name might be spelled wrong.
Oh,
But I don't know if she spelled it.
At the meeting, I don't. recall.
Yeah,
I will verify that. I think I copied that from the meeting. Usually the name pops up. I'll double check that. If I misspelled that, I will.
I have a feeling she might not have an H at the end of her first name.
Okay.
Based on weird memory of next door or something.
That's funny. That's where I was gonna think. that.
Yes.
Okay, I will double check that, and if I need to
Okay.
make that correction,
It's super
I'll do
minor.
that. Yeah,
Sorry.
no,
Oh, thank
absolutely.
you. All right, well, does anyone want to make a motion to accept the minutes in a second? Thanks, Jackie. Motion to accept the minutes from George Zimmerman and Commissioner Altman. Second motion.
Great, so we have everybody, we have a motion and a second on the table. For those that would like to vote yes, if you can go ahead and raise your hand, I'm seeing, and then I know Commissioner Coleman was so abstained because he was not at the meeting last week. So
Okay.
great.
Abstain?
Thank you
Okay.
very much.
All right, then, let's move on to item F. Study sessions are an opportunity for city staff to introduce an item that will require action from the commission in the near future. City staff will provide a brief presentation. I will then call for public comment. After public comment, the commission will discuss the matter interactively with staff. The commission will not take an action on items addressed in study sessions. The commission may provide direction to city staff for preparation of additional analysis or information necessary when the item returns to the commission for action. I would like to suggest, if you don't mind, Kevin, that I reread that because that's new
Go for
language.
it.
So do you need to provide any context about new language, the new
I was gonna
language?
give a little context.
Before, when you spoke?
Right. yeah,
Okay,
yeah,
so
yeah.
I will just reread this. Is that okay? Because
Yeah,
it's new.
Yeah, go for it.
Okay, item F, study session. Study sessions are an opportunity for city staff to introduce an item that will require action from the commission in the near future. City staff will provide a brief presentation. I will then call for public comment. After public comment, the commission will discuss the matter interactively with staff. The commission will not take an action on items addressed in study sessions. The commission may provide direction to city staff for preparation of additional analysis or information necessary when the item returns to the commission for action. The one study session item tonight is to provide feedback on the Menlo Park Community Campus Parking Management Plan. Kevin, our senior transportation engineer, will you please introduce the item?
Great, thank you, Madam Chair. So I believe at this time, people attending by Zoom online should be able to see the presentation. So I'm gonna go ahead and begin. So again, Kevin Chen, Senior Transportation Engineer with the city. Definitely happy to be here tonight to present the item in front of you. Just to kind of reiterate Chair Cole's remark a little bit earlier, this is a study session. It is somewhat new to us in the commission. Typically, a study session is reserved for items that are going to come back to the commission for an action in the near future. So this is meant to be an item that is here to solicit feedback from the commission, which will help us develop ultimately what will be the parking management plan. So kind of see this as a high-level conversation. We're looking for feedback on specific items, on general items, and at the end of the day, take those feedback back to the drawing board and then come up with a draft plan, which will then come back to the commission in the future. So, and we're tentatively aiming for a February timeframe to come back to the commission. So hopefully that kind of clears it up a little bit. I know this is new to the entire commission here. So like I say, wrong keyboard. So tonight's item, apologize. Let me see if I can minimize this so that you don't have to see the screen as well. There we go. Okay. So as a title suggested, tonight's item is the MPCC, which is the Menlo Park Community Center for the time being. That's the name of the center, the building, so to speak. Tonight's item here is to talk about a parking management plan. So as you know, there is currently extensive construction going on in the area. This is essentially the end of terminal, what used to be the old Onetta Harris Community Center. Basically, there's a lot of information that will be that I'll go over tonight, but I'll try to go over them briefly, provide as much information as I can, and then looking for your feedback. So kind of outline tonight, talk about the background of the project, some of the evaluations that have taken place thus far, and of course, at the end, looking for your feedback on specific items that we are seeking tonight. What did I do?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, still there. So I apologize, I'm flying solo tonight, so having some
Yeah,
difficulty with
thank you
that.
for doing that.
So background information for those of you that might not be as familiar with the progress of the project. So like I mentioned, the MPCC back in December of 2019, Meta came to the city with a proposal to essentially reconstruct the building, what used to be the Onetta Harris building. Of course, then with the proposal, followed by January and February of next year, 2021, the city council heard the proposal and ultimately approved the MPCC building, sort of the concept itself, plus the pool design or the concept of the pool, because at that time, the pool was sort of a separate entity. So given the cost and some of the layouts that needs to happen, they decided to kind of package that together. And of course, for the time being, we're aiming for construction duration, obviously it started already, November of 2021. We're tentatively aiming for 2024 to be the end of the construction period. So that below is a couple really nice renderings of the new MPCC building, plus the pool. So the next few slides are some of the evaluations that have taken place thus far that I wanted to kind of share with the commission. Again, fairly high level and happy to kind of go into more details after the presentation. But the first item I want to highlight is a parking analysis that had taken place back in 2020 when the project first got approved. It's essentially what we call a shared parking analysis. And the reason why it was conducted, typically we'll conduct a shared parking analysis if a particular parcel would have land uses that doesn't have competing parking interest. Meaning like, so the very best example I can give you would be residential versus commercial, right? You need parking for residents at nighttime. You need parking in the morning during the day for office buildings. So they're non-competing, so to speak, right? So with MPCC, it's meant to cover the community center, the senior center, the youth center, the pool, of course, and then also a branch library that is currently located on Ivy, basically next to or part of the Bellhaven Elementary School. So once the construction is complete, everything's occupied, the library is meant to move over from where it's currently at to the MPCC.
Kevin, sorry to interrupt, but could you provide us with the context of what of these different uses existed on this site
Before, yeah,
and what are new uses?
absolutely.
Yeah.
Everything is there before except the library. The
Okay.
library is the only thing that's new. for
Okay.
there, yeah, yeah. And that was sort of done on purpose that way. It meant to kind of provide an elevated experience of the existing or the previously existing facilities, buildings, and programs that were out in
You
the
could
area.
almost argue that the library helped to drive the
Right.
motivation for building that building.
Yeah, and then of course, if you drive further kind of down, you'll see Kelly Park. If you haven't been to Kelly Park before, I highly recommend it. It's really nice field. There's a track field, there's a soccer field, tennis courts, basketball hoops. It's a really nice field if you haven't been there before. So, and then for the purpose of this study, we essentially kind of consider both the MPCC plus the Kelly field as one entity, even though they are somewhat separated a little bit, but we're considering them as an entity. So essentially kind of the table below right here that you're seeing is sort of the conclusion of that study. And again, to kind of just quickly go over some of the high levels, I did identify sort of the MPCC plus Beechwood School, which is essentially kind of, if you consider that to be one area, there's Kelly Park in the back. If you consider that to be kind of the second area, of course, the entire site is essentially the combination of both. And I think the essence of the study concluded that, if you consider all entities as one, that the peak demand in the future, which in this case would be 6 p.m. for the entire site, there's generally a typical demand of 155 parking spaces necessary. And the site, during the time of the parking study, identified 164 parking spaces. So essentially the conclusion is that there is generally enough supply to park a typical weekday.
How does it get to 6 p.m.? How do you, if the peak is 11 a.m. and 5 p.m.,
That's
was there a kind of a tail to each of them?
Yeah,
Is it that-
definitely. Yeah, so that's kind of where that nature of the shared parking, where the parking demand really comes in. So with the MPCC, with the Beechwood School, you're typically looking at demand that are coming in, between 8 a.m. to say 3 p.m. right? Where versus the Kelly Park field, generally the games and the tournaments don't really start until after 4, so to speak. It's kind of an after-school activity.
But on the future one, it's 6 p.m. rather than, I would assume it would be 5 p.m.
Right,
for
yeah,
the
so
entire site?
by 5 p.m., kind of Beechwood schools kind of dismiss some of the programs that would be taking place in the community center
it's
will be
talking
done by now.
Yeah, but if there's
so-
a tail that from 11 a.m. Yeah, that's the one.
Right,
Yeah.
so the 6 p.m. would be kind of the 6 p.m. essentially, if you look at the actual study, is encompass a lot, basically all the demand of Kelly Park, plus maybe half the demand of the MPCC at that time.
So people are at the MPCC.
Right.
And they're at 6 p.m. is the peak hour? for
Right,
the
so like
MPCC?
MPCC, if you imagine MPCC as a whole, and Beechwood in this case would be as a whole, Beechwood School would have session from 8 to 3, right? So the parking
Right, that's
lot will
kind
be
of that
full with
peak.
staff. MPCC will have some senior programs, some community programs going on, probably peak out around 11 to 12, and then as some of the programs dismiss, people start leaving the building. So now you don't have a peak anymore, like around 2 or 3. By 4 o'clock, some of the programs are, so people are gone, right? But now Kelly Park, you start seeing people coming in for games, for tournaments, for activities, etc. So
Wait, did you already explain why you're expecting it to change so dramatically from before to after?
Library.
from before and after.
Yeah, so before the peak hour was 3 p.m., now it's gonna be 11, just because of the library?
Yeah, some not necessarily. Some of the programs are shifting as well,
Oh,
and,
okay.
and they're also anticipating, with a new building, they're also anticipating some of the programs to be able to start earlier.
Got
So
it,
the
okay.
only thing that is sort of staying consistent from a before and after standpoint would be, I think Beechwood School would be fairly
Yeah,
similar. But I think this study sort of taking into account some of the operational changes that would occur with the new building and some of the programs that would happen as well.
Okay, well, I'm sort of guessing, but I don't want to do that, the peak of the entire site moving from 4 to 6 p.m. is due to the fact that there'll be more nighttime programs at like the community center or the senior.
Yeah,
center.
there's a little bit more. There's a little bit more too, because we have a library now, so they anticipate
so library's
some
open at
people
night,
staying
okay.
for the library in the afternoon. Kids
Okay,
coming to the library during the afternoon activity. So
Okay.
there is definitely a little bit of a shift going on that is occurring. Yeah. So
does that have anything to do with people parking on the site at 6 who aren't using this?
No.
Okay, all right, thank you.
So yeah. So that's kind of the general conclusion. And again, happy to kind of answer any detailed
And
questions.
this is held, like, this is 2020, but this is kind of what we're still.
Right, and the study was done with, looking at
Mhm.
quote unquote existing characteristics at the
Mhm.
time, and then using that to kind of project some of the
Mhm.
future operations, and of course, yeah,
Pre-COVID.
pre-COVID, right, that's correct. Using the keyboard. Hey, so a couple of things that have changed since then, as by then I meant the study. So one of the things that we have changed is sort of the supply. It's going down from 164 to 162, and the reason for that is because we did a sort of from a project standpoint, as you progress your design, staff looking into the evaluation, and there are some pedestrian improvements that we wanted to implement to kind of make it a little bit safer. So as a result of that, we needed to kind of take away a couple parking spaces. And luckily, it doesn't really impact sort of conclusion, given that there was a little bit of a surplus there before. So, and then the other thing that I do want to highlight, and I believe I highlighted this in the past as well, that back in, well, not too far back, October of 18, the city council approved a set of intersections. They're going to receive new stop signs, and those are typically for school routes. So in that case, that meeting, one of the intersections that got approved was Terminal and Del Norte. So right now, Terminal, if you drive through that intersection, if you're driving on Terminal, you do not have to stop. You can just kind of go through. If you're on Del Norte, you do have a stop sign. So our goal is that with the opening of the MPCC building, we will convert that intersection to an always stop, meaning if you're driving in on Terminal, you will have to come to a stop before you proceed and enter into sort of the site as a whole. And then that's for, one is really some kind of serve as a safety for some of the kids, especially Beechwood doing, some of the daily activities where they have to cross. but also just kind of general feedback that we got from the community that, a stop sign here will be really helpful for various reasons. That's why.
I thought that street was crazy narrow though. The street terminal
On terminal,
was crazy narrow.
Yeah.
With like no bike lanes, nothing.
right.
Is there any thought to put some bike lanes in there, or I don't know how many kids are riding bikes on that street?
Yeah, it's not currently in any of our considerations for now. It's always something that we can explore if in the future there's a need for it. It is going to be a little trickier when it comes to putting bike lane on terminal in most.
Because there's a no parking,
Yeah,
like no
yeah.
parking between whatever hours.
Right,
like
yeah,
that.
so there's some ways you can kind of explore that if in the future there's a need for that.
It just seemed like there's gonna be a lot more traffic, oh, not a lot more, but a percentage more traffic going down terminal,
Right,
right, for multiple reasons now.
Right.
Including the library.
Yeah.
And there's kids there.
Yeah.
And kids on bikes. right?
exactly, yeah.
It just seemed crazy narrow to me. It just,
Yeah, especially when there's cars parked on both sides. Terminal does get narrow. when you're-
Parked on both
yeah, both
sides.
sides, yeah.
Yeah.
So I apologize that I did not go to the side before the meeting. Sounds fine that you did, thank you. I'm just wondering, since this plan was approved with city council, was there public comment on anything to do with terminal or bike lanes or? 'cause people are probably starting to think about, oh, how kids get there. and-
I mean, in terms of facilities, Bellhaven is one where there's currently sidewalk on most of the streets, if not all the streets. Bike lane obviously would be a little different. I don't think there's any bike lane within the neighborhood, unless you count kind of the shoulder lanes on New Bridge. So, and typically with the volumes around those areas, it's relatively low. We would probably, yeah, we would probably classify them, if we put in some sort of a bike facility, we would probably do class 3 to begin with, kind of that share road, highlight the fact that this is a road that is shared by car and bike.
yeah, maybe something going on.
Right, yeah, exactly. So that would be kind of an easy, not easy, but sort of a low hanging fruit that we can highlight the sharing nature
Something,
of a street, yeah.
Let me ask you a total bizarre question, all right? I'm sure this is, but that track that's on the other side. the
Yes.
Railroad track,
Yeah, yeah.
it's inactive, right?
Right.
Or, has there been any thought to run something like across the track into the meta facility over there on the other side?
Yeah,
Or something, or some other access besides just terminal to get to this beautiful like facility? I mean, whether you're
Yeah.
gonna go play soccer, go for a swim, go to the library, go to
Right.
the school. It just seems like it's like a great facility that's just got this very tight alleyway to get down to it.
yeah.
But I mean,
essentially
I don't
kind
know,
of
if some-
used
yeah,
terminal,
I'm sure
yeah.
that's super expensive, but, or is there some other way of getting some type of access from another path into there?
Yep.
Um,
Yeah, so I think Commissioner Baruzzi kind of mentioned that there is currently some effort that is happening. I don't know exactly kind of the status of that, so I'm happy to kind of get the information and
Hey,
share that.
Kevin.
Yeah.
I can speak to that. So yeah, it's an active conversation. There have been a variety of conversations with developers nearby, and then we're having some ongoing conversations with Samtrans, who owns the rail line. I should clarify, the rail line is an active rail line. It's not inactive. They do run trains on it, just not very frequently, but it meets that. There's a legal definition of active railway, and it meets that legal definition.
Well, it's barricaded in a couple places.
Yeah, and you can't cross it, but you can. It's
No,
used.
Yeah, no,
The
you
railway is
can't use it
barricaded.
either.
It's
Yeah.
very, I mean, the
They
track-
don't go
Very early.
north. They don't go east of Chilco, but they do run trains essentially all the way along it up till
The kind of the
essentially
legal
right
definition,
behind. say.
Not truly train running.
Yeah.
They sometimes bring in boxcars, and then they take the boxcars away. but
Okay.
They can in fact run cars on
I
that
got it.
rail. I
Okay.
have seen the numbers of cars change, but past Chilco. it's all-
So this is definitely something that, I mean, former Commissioner Levin was agitating about appropriately.
Right.
And I think it was mentioned in the last planning commission meeting when they were reviewing 123 Independence. It's being discussed.
Yeah,
Okay.
it's in our TMP
Dream.
actually.
Okay.
We do
I
have it as a
just-
project.
It
in
just
our
seemed
TMP.
like it's just a great facilities. I mean, it just, but
Yeah.
it goes down, there's choke point,
Mhm.
Right.
multi-use choke point, right? You know, even if you want to get down there just to do a master swim at 5 or 6 a.m., it's hard.
Well, just that
I've got a
we're
buddy
building-
that does that.
We're building a whole community, a whole housing, a whole neighborhood over there. of people,
Exactly,
And if they can't get across the tracks and have to go all the way around, it's really
And it's even,
counterproductive.
That's such, yeah.
and Meta's sponsoring it or, funding us like, how do you, if you're Meta, how do you get there? You have to go all the way around, right?
Right, yeah. Well, I mean, for all kind of right away jurisdiction, right away from Meta probably doesn't have as big of a say in this case. In
Well,
fact,
I
they don't
mean,
end
but
any of the
there's a lot of
land that
people.
need it,
I'm just
so,
saying there's a lot
yeah.
of people there that would.
Yeah, oh yeah. I mean, I think that there's a reason why there's a kind of an ongoing conversation.
Okay.
To recognize the
Okay.
city recognizing some of the residential areas that's gonna go in, et cetera, et cetera. But I will highlight that it's not an easy conversation to be had, but they are having that conversation, for sure.
It's not easy because of, just because it's already been addressed, or it's not easy.
Money right away,
Money, okay.
money,
Complexity,
money, yeah.
money.
Complexity. I think that's a really good way of.
multiple
putting it.
jurisdictions.
That's one
Yeah,
of the things
that's-
that keeps
yeah.
coming up, yeah.
Anytime you gotta go up or down, it exponential, well, down exponentially increasing the cost. Middle Avenue. being like the example.
Right. Well, I've long dreamed that we would put a bike ped path alongside those tracks.
Oh, maybe something like
I
that.
have a dream of it.
But also like the Tide Kids, right? Like I think
Uh-huh.
about that, it just, the number of, and especially now with those new communities going in, I think it's
Yeah,
ever more important. to
and I
focus
think
on
right now
this.
kind of definitely highlights, and then this really, that's why I think the conversation is ongoing as well. Is that kind of the needs really, and people are seeing the need.
Sure, and especially when space is such a rarity, and
Yeah.
you look at this beautiful stretch of like
Right.
potential path, it pains
Yeah,
me every time.
Yeah.
No, I bet. My brother lives in Charlotte and they do this river walk thing where they take this whole.
Oh, yeah, I've done
road,
that.
you know,
Yeah, it's really
And
nice.
it's incredible what it did.
Definitely, yeah. Yeah, and happy to kind of talk offline if there's any, if any additional information that you're looking for. He would be a good go-to for that
So
too.
Kevin's still presenting.
Yeah,
I'm sorry.
couple more slides, but yeah. So yeah, so one other thing that I do want to highlight before we kind of get back to the go toward the feedback slide would be some of the operations and this slide I think
Yeah.
really amounts to some of the feedbacks they're going to have provide later on. One is sort of the pick up and drop off, and that has to do with some of the activities that sort of occur. And one specifically is community food and meal distribution service. Right, because of COVID, they sort of changed the way that service is delivered more to a curbside versus a kind of a park and a walk type of service. So that is one thing that has changed due to COVID, and most likely will continue to be the case even with the new building. It's kind of a nice service for, especially for the seniors, if you don't have to, easier for them. Of
So
course,
from a parking perspective, that reduces the need for parking because people are driving through.
a little bit. I wouldn't go
little bit,
that
or-
far.
okay.
I wouldn't go that far, but I think there is some benefit in doing it this way
Yeah.
that is not being captured statistically speaking. But I wouldn't go
Okay.
too far yet. Yeah.
It is worth noting as we plan for like circulation, that traffic, that line to pick up food can back up onto terminal.
Mhm.
Which then creates like,
Good.
I mean, not a lot, I've seen, but.
Right. Yeah.
That was
So-
a new, like, if you come on food pickup day, I think I didn't expect there to be a line of cars, I don't know. I
What
haven't
day
found
did
it
you say?
accidentally.
I think it's Tuesday.
It's on Tuesday. The senior program, I think it's Tuesday and Thursday. That's like a 3-hour window, and then for the families, I think it's on a Tuesday, also a 3-hour window. I don't know the
It
exact.
might have been during COVID when there were like,
Right.
maybe more or at different times.
Yeah, yeah.
Right, yeah, so the service definitely, I think, kind of, they definitely adjust during COVID. But after COVID, after the MPCC, I think the schedule will be a little bit more constant with that in mind.
I
So, yeah.
should say during the peak of the COVID, as if it's somehow gone.
And of course, with the youth center, the after school program, and with Beechwood, there's obviously going to be a little bit of a drop off from pickup. However, those are, especially with Beechwood, it's kind of self-sustained. They have their own area right there. The youth center, as you can see later on, that we do recommend changing the curb designation a little bit to kind of accommodate some of the youth center pickup and drop off that might.
Oh,
occur
that's good.
at the
So
curbside.
I was gonna ask if we're gonna see like a diagram, where we could see what the pickup drop off kind of dedication is. Okay.
Absolutely. And then the other thing that probably will warrant some conversation tonight would be kind of the overnight parking situation that occurs in the area. I'm not sure Commissioner Cibrian knows it well, but basically, based on sort of observation and feedback that we received, is that the old Oneida Harris Building parking lot used to see cars parked there overnight, and we currently do not have any ordinance or a meaningful ordinance that sort of says yay or nay either way, so to speak. So one of the conversations that we want to have tonight, which again will lead to sort of the recommendation that's coming in February, will be how do we want to address that overnight parking. I think in the staff report, we sort of highlight that a little bit, but now going to the feedback slide. So here are sort of the high level topics. I'm going to go over them briefly for your benefit. And then my last slide would be sort of a picture of the parking lot with some of the recommendations, some of the priority areas that we talk about here highlighted for your benefit. So in terms of the standard parking, we are currently trying to explore whether or not prioritize parking for Beechwood, which would essentially be very consistent with the past practice that we had before. Also looking to see if there's any desire to kind of prioritize parking spaces for senior center. Again, the next slide will kind of show where we have in mind right now, but feedback obviously would be welcome. We're also thinking about some time restricted spaces, kind of give it a little bit of a high turnover use. So that way, maybe someone that wants to go to the library, drop off a book, they can do so without worry about competing with other parking needs there. And we talk about circulation a little bit, of course, and like I say, there'll be a little bit of a conversion of a curb space use, and then the terminal on Del Norte, given that while it's been approved, obviously any feedback that you guys have around the area would be welcome as well. And then the overnight parking requirement, again, tonight, we're kind of just looking for general feedback. A couple of things I do want to highlight, it's kind of the different impacts to the various city facilities. So for example, parking overnight, how that impacts the morning operation. Say if the new building going to open at 8 o'clock or 6 o'clock, what would that do to those facilities? And of course, with any change, like I mentioned earlier, we currently do not have any ordinance or anything in the Muni Code that explicitly talk about this. So anything that we recommend as part of this body that will ultimately go towards the city council will need to go through sort of an ordinance change process, which, if you don't know, takes a few meetings just for the ordinance change itself. So not a small effort if we need to do so. And of course, just any other feedback that we're having tonight. And we already got some really good feedback already. So great to have that continue. So like I say, here's kind of the exhibit that demonstrates some of the talking points that I had, the legends and the what their corresponding meaning is on the graphic exhibit here. So I'll go back to that, but just kind of finish my presentation here. So thank you. So in terms of procedure, maybe we can take a couple clarifying questions if you still have clarifying questions, and then open it up for public comments before we bring it back for a discussion.
I realized, Kevin, that we were asking clarifying
Yes.
questions during the presentation. I set the bad example. So pardon that. So any clarifying questions from the commission before we take public comment? Anything else?
There was one thing I was confused about on the diagram, something about PG&E land. Is that just sort of? Oh, the PG&E substation.
Yeah, there's a PG&E substation. So if you're looking at this, actually
It looked like
maybe,
there were
Somewhere
parking
like Kelly,
spaces.
right?
yeah,
Oh,
yeah, it's
yeah.
kind of more further south. Let me go to that slide.
That
So
little spot by the pool.
you know exactly
It
where it
stops,
is.
as you go by the,
Yeah, so basically, if you look south of the pool area, you see that dotted line. Like anything south of that is you see land of PG&E actually.
Yeah.
Which is,
Yeah.
yeah.
So those parking
Below
spaces
that.
are PG&E parking spaces?
I think it's currently up for debate,
Okay,
but
Oh.
we are currently,
Oh,
we're counting those spaces.
you are counting,
oh,
Okay,
but we can't totally count on them?
I think we could count them. Yeah,
Okay, okay.
are those, where are the railroad tracks in all of this? Sorry.
north, right
North.
above the cutoff line. Well, maybe 50 feet
Okay.
north of the cutoff.
Okay, I had a question about that, but I'll save that. You brought the PG anything? Who brought the PG?
I did. I'm also curious, I saw, I know we should go to public comment, but I'm curious about the bike parking.
Mhm.
I only saw it in one place. Are there more places?
There should be more places.
It's just not on the diagram.
Yeah, it's probably just not. on
Like
the
especially
diagram.
over by Kelly Park, it seemed like there would obviously be bike racks, but in this.
There are
Kelly
some,
Park,
there's some there already.
Yeah.
there's some
Okay,
already
okay,
there.
okay,
Kelly
alright.
Park is not technically speaking part of the MPCC, so if there's more parking spaces necessary for
That's like a
Kelly
different
Park,
discussion. Got it.
we can always
Oh.
just kind of
So-
go
so
ahead and
those-
do it.
Oh, that's
Or we can do it as part of this effort. It's just that technically speaking, it's not
Okay.
part of the project scope.
So the parking spaces that are in front of in front of the field
Yeah.
are in the analysis, right? Or
For
For
parking,
parking,
yes.
Yeah.
For car parking, yes.
park, okay.
Yeah. I think she was talking about. bike
Yeah,
parking.
yeah, I wanted to just understand
Yeah.
how much parking you were wanting for.
Right, so in this case,
There's like 15 or 20
Okay.
spots over there.
the Kelly Park, that Kelly Park line represents those parking behind.
Okay, okay. And then the parking spaces that are associated with PG&E were counted in before, right? They have been in use?
Right, yeah,
Okay.
and I wouldn't call them PG&E parking,
Okay,
so
I
to
won't-
speak.
I won't
yeah,
call
yeah,
that.
yes.
I won't call them that. So it's been in use. Okay, okay. Mhm.
Pool parking.
Pool parking, yeah.
Pool parking.
MPCC parking.
There you go.
That's easy enough. Okay, so can we go to the slide before we take public comment with the blue shades, that one of the end last, no, it's, sorry, I think it's the last slide of the deck where you've shaded, like, this could be the,
Oh,
yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
there we go, sorry.
Yeah, no,
that's
no.
okay.
Hey, Kevin,
Because
can I
that
just,
one-
I heard a little bit from, we have some of our library community services listening in, and there was a quick point that they wanted to share, which is that there are a couple new afternoon programs that are a makerspace program and a teen center. 'Cause I know earlier there was a little conversation about demand. So just as a FYI on that. And then also, if any of you are interested actually having a construction tour, those are also possible. We can send some email about that afterwards.
Yes,
Yes,
yes, we have a lot of interest in that here.
It's a really
Enthusiasm.
good, it's a really
Yeah,
good
yeah.
sight to behold when you.
So,
look at
so
construction.
new programs, one of the things you just said, Hugh, is we should be aware there are additional programs.
I think there was a question and there was sort of back and forth, so I didn't want to jump in, but there was about some of the demand. So there are some new teen oriented programs in a makerspace that are primarily afternoon programs or evening programs, afternoon/evening programs.
And the library that is going in this building is bigger than the library that has been in the Bellhaven space and is meant to be for everyone from the get-go. Whereas Bellhaven has been trying to shift itself from being solely a kids library, but still 85% kids books and a couple little shelves of young
Okay.
adult. So the
Oh.
new library will have more, will be designed for a larger audience than the current library is, which should increase more people. And it's a new use to that building. And it's gonna be a new building, so I anticipate
Cool.
that like the other side of 101 is gonna find those really nice story times that,
yeah.
and I think like, as we talk about all this, one of the things I really, I think we need to put like good wayfinding, but not just wayfinding, but motivational wayfinding, right? So like, hey, if you drive here from Burgess, it will take you X number of minutes, right? If you ride your bike, it'll take you this many minutes. And just to really encourage, because it's really easy from the other side of 101 if you take the bike bridge. It's kind of a pain if you have to like wind your way all the way around, and ingress and egress from Bellhaven is not super simple, like it's limited. And so I just think like the more that we can figure out ways to encourage multimodal transportation and from the city, like, at some point, is there gonna be a shuttle sort of thing that could wind around that would be more, I mean, I guess the midday shuttle, but just considering those items, because one of the concerns that the residents did have in the original, like, conversation about where to put the library, the redoing of the community center is, that was gonna be a lot more people coming up Terminal, because to your point, like, there isn't really another way to get there. You can kind of come in, like, if you're coming from Newbridge, you don't have, you can come in it, there are other ways
It's a little
there,
bit
but,
of a maze. There is some wayfinding there going out,
right.
going back to the other way of 101.
But I think
Yeah,
like
but it would
something
be
that
really good.
really like emphasizes how much better it will be for everyone if you
Right.
ride your bike,
Right.
right? Or do
Right.
your strollers, but
Mhm,
like
mhm.
making the walk, making sure that those sidewalk, like that path, right? That we've made it as nice as possible to walk and ride to the new place.
We should have public comment, huh? Because I feel like
Oh, sure.
we're starting
Sorry.
to migrate into
Yep.
the.
Yeah.
Yes,
stop clarifying questions
Kevin,
and just
if we're
started
done with our
soapbox.
clarifying questions. Kevin, can you call for public comment, please?
Yes, thank you. So just kind of remind everybody that's attending by Zoom that please do engage your raise hand feature. If you're calling from the landline or cell phone, press 9 to raise your virtual hand. And for folks that are in attendance, if you'd like to speak, just go ahead. Maybe at this time, just raise your hand and then we'll recognize that you want to speak. And then a chair can call on. So maybe let's let the people in attendance speak first. So chair,
Yes.
do you want to
Are
call?
we doing a 3-minute thing or?
Yes. 3 minutes, yeah.
Yes.
I don't have that much to say,
Well,
although
please-
anybody who knows me, it's really hard for me to keep my mouth shut, and I've been sitting here nodding and all
Oh,
the things
okay.
you've been saying.
Would you like to introduce yourself?
My name is
Before you
Melinda, oh,
Please go
sorry.
ahead.
Okay,
Thank you.
Melinda Christopherson. I work at Beechwood School, and I've been a part of meeting with Kevin and Meta through this whole construction project, dealing with keeping our kids arriving to and from school safely. The terminal is very narrow. Cars drive fast down it. But Kevin and the Meta team have been great in helping us with crossing guards, a stop sign, or not a stop sign, across,
Crosswalk.
thank you,
Crosswalk.
crosswalk. But anyway, I'm thrilled with the new parking lot. I'm here to answer any questions that you might have about Beechwood and our usage of the lot. But also to just put in our plea for signage that would dedicate those spots to Beechwood. Beechwood's been there since 1986, and I've been there for 22 years, and I can tell you that that parking lot does get filled up with overnight parking and people that don't even pay attention to the signage. But if we could ever get enforcement, that would be terrific. It's not a safe lot sometimes with the people and the vehicles that are left there overnight. And if the new community center needs to be used or have programs early morning, I can tell you that there'll be a lot of cars there in the morning that people will have a hard time getting to the pool. Justin Murphy and I had, and this was all starting years ago, spent a lot of time counting cars that were left there overnight. So, anyway, that's my 2 cents. If you have any questions about Beechwood, and when you want to come tour the new construction, you can come and see our school too and see where we are and the partnership we have with that area.
I have a question, but does it have to be within 3 minutes for answering?
If you just keep it brief.
Okay, my clarifying question is, before the construction, did Beechwood School have spaces that were dedicated to Beechwood School? Or-
No.
Okay,
They did not have any signage, but there was an area kind of that was ours, like it is there.
okay, okay. And then in terms of the overnight parking, what is the usage that, just because you said you were counting cars and whatnot, like, what is the usage that you typically see for cars? And do they leave in the morning, I guess is my other question.
They
In
do.
terms of your observation.
Yes, I would say for the most part, they leave, but I've had, you could see on my phone, I take pictures of cars all the time that were left there
Mm.
for days.
Mm, mhm, mhm.
But most people are out by 8 o'clock.
Okay, all right. Anyone else have any clarifying questions? Thank you for your comment.
Then I think let's just kind of move over to Zoom. I'm not seeing anyone with their hands raised. So I think at this point, we can close the public comment period and
Okay.
come back for a
All right, then.
conversation.
More conversation. So commission, do you have any feedback? I did have some conversations with people in District 1. This project is a really big deal. And just seeing, even in this discussion, how important the parking is to the success of the plan. But anyway, I had a couple of folks in District 1 ask a few questions. One, that's why I asked where the railroad tracks was.
Right.
Someone said that there is an area near the railroad tracks right now where the construction vehicles are parking.
Mhm.
And will that be possibly freed up to be used for parking related to MPCC?
Yeah, so I did see that email as well. So I think one thing that just kind of to clarify, the from the track to about 50 feet south, which is essentially kind of the borderline of our project here, those are all going to be kind of the rail right away. So I would say kind of it's something that we'll probably need to have a further conversation with them. I think we got the kind of the desire and it's kind of got the message to explore that as an option. So we can certainly engage them with that conversation and then kind of see where that goes. One other thing that we'll need to probably consider would be, I don't believe previously there was no access to it. This was an
I see.
access that was kind of created for construction. And it was not meant to be a kind of
Permanent,
a permanent
right.
feature. It was never a feature to begin with,
Right.
and it's not meant to be a permanent feature. But I think that's kind of a conversation that we can start and see what happens.
And it's also like the parking where they're like is on the other side of the tracks from this building. And our issue, like we're all here talking about how we want to have an access across the tracks. That parking, like technically, you could park, even if you could park there with the construction workers, there's a fence between you and the library because the railroad is not currently a place where people just can walk across.
Right.
And so even though you just can walk, the tracks are right there, it's on the other side of the tracks.
Yeah.
And so I think
Okay,
that
that's a big
is
deal.
that's the jurisdictional barrier we're
Right.
already wrestling with.
Any other clarifying?
Approximately how many cars are parked there overnight or vehicles are parked there overnight? Is it like 5 or 10 or 20 or what's the average number? overnight?
Kevin, have you guys been tracking this?
Am I allowed to?
Go for
continue?
it.
You
Oh,
can
no.
ask me
Yeah,
questions.
Yeah, go for it.
May I-
Yeah.
Well, it's completely closed down now, so,
Yeah, I
but I would say in the neighborhood of 20.
20.
Yeah.
20. Is that,
Kevin, I'm sorry.
go ahead, I'm sorry.
Are there other city-owned lots where people are parking their cars overnight?
One comes to mind would be Nealon Park. And I understand that the back end of the Nealon Park parking lot, which is basically kind of the
Against
little,
those apartments?
yeah.
So I feel like we're dancing around this. Are these people is this overflow parking from residents or is it people sleeping in their cars?
I believe they are overflow
It's
parking.
not-
for residents. Yeah, because
Okay.
of
Because
our,
there's no overnight
because
street
our,
parking.
yeah,
Okay, so the fact that it doesn't exist right now means those cars have had to go somewhere overnight. Where have they gone?
most likely still on the street.
So is overnight parking enforcement not happening in Bellhaven?
My understanding is that it hasn't been as frequent. Yeah.
A lot of them got tickets the other day, I noticed, or at least there were things on dashboard.
It is a bit haphazard, the enforcement of the overnight thing, because, and such that I would say it lends itself to rumors that they're not enforcing it anymore, which makes people park.
Which wouldn't be the case.
I mean, if you go to other communities adjacent to Menlo Park,
Mhm.
that are not Menlo Park and also not Atherton, East Palo Alto, Redwood City, you see massive usage of on-street parking. Because most of the single-family houses, those neighborhoods are not actually single-family houses. They have like several families living in them, each one. Because we have laws in our state that are really goofy that don't allow us to build adequate housing for people. And so instead we have a family per bedroom or something. And I sort of morally have, I struggle with, I think the reason that one of the reasons we don't have as much overcrowding in Inland Park is because of the lack of overnight parking. But I'm always troubled when we are penalizing people who are in such desperate straits that they are, sharing a house with 14 other people or whatever. So I get the issues with the overnight parking, but
I guess if I'm understanding it.
Go ahead.
No, actually, since you have been really familiar with this particular area, please go ahead.
I mean, personally, I am not opposed to the overnight parking ban. Like, I don't want cars that stay there. Like, I think cars, and so,
Sure.
and I have, it is my feeling that there are cars that wouldn't move off the street if we allowed for overnight parking. And then, yeah, so I don't know, I just, I guess my first question is, if it's a thing that we're allowing, then I would say it has to be allowed in all the city parking lots. And like, that just so that it's right, if we're saying that you could do it, then we need to say you could do it everywhere. And if we are saying you can do it everywhere, like, is that a city policy we want to set?
it's not a policy. It's more like, I think if I understand Kevin correctly, there isn't a policy that expressly forbids it right now.
Right, so yeah, so I'm kind of coming from a lack of exact,
Clarity.
yeah, exactly, clarity. So I think one of the questions or one of the feedbacks that we're looking for from the commission tonight would be, or kind of the high level question would be like, how do we want to address this, right? So that's why in the staff report, and I think here, we talk about if we probably would need to go through some sort of an ordinance change if there's a explicit direction that we're going towards, either a yay or nay. I think both would require additional effort through the ordinance change, basically.
Can you go back to the slide that has the colored parking?
Yeah.
And can we discuss signage? Like in the blue area, that's Beechwood School, is there going to be signage that says school parking Monday through Friday, 6 a.m. to 6 p.m.? And, the seniors and the quick spots, is that going to be 15-minute parking? Is that, going to be senior handicap? What are we looking at?
Right, so the color coding correspond to the purpose in terms
Understood.
of the signage. If collectively tonight and approved by the city council is that yes, we do want to prioritize these parkings, we would then go ahead and put up signs. So right now, we haven't really explored where the signs would be, but if the answer is yes, we do want to prioritize these parking spaces, then that will be the next step. So for example, with Beechwood, it's a one-way circulation. I think it makes sense to have maybe a big sign that says, prioritize parking for Beechwood. From, I think in the past, we have a sign that says 8 a.m. to 3 p.m. or something like that, right? So for the seniors, which would be the red area with similar signs. For the time restricted spaces, I think we have talked to our community service department, and then right now we are kind of thinking about maybe like a 2-hour parking time limit.
For the green?
But for the green.
Really?
That's really long.
I would have thought like 20 minutes.
Yeah,
Okay.
20 minutes for
So
library.
if that's something that the commission as a whole believes that maybe we should go down to 20 minutes, we'll take that as feedback, share that with our community service
Because
department
people
and
honor that.
see how they feel about that, because they do kind of know sort of the lay of the land operational wise previously better than even we do here.
Where's the
what we
library
think
Dropbox
is-
gonna be?
I'm sorry,
Where's the library
Thinking the
Dropbox?
same
gonna be?
thing.
that's a very good question. I do not know the answer to that. I will make a note of that.
Well, yeah, 'cause-
I don't need to know that answer. I'm just
Right.
thinking that, like, thinking about how the other library works.
Right,
Although
right.
there's some possibility that somebody listening to this call might know the answer.
Help us. No.
Sean.
Is it?
It's by
But
the
it's
front,
interesting
it's by the front entry, apparently. I've got a man on the line. Who knows?
Man on the line. Well, that was the example you used, right? Like, maybe we have shorter timeframes for parking spaces because someone's just dropping a book off. And that example to me is the perfect example.
Right.
But the way it's done here, I know it takes some real estate to do it, but when you just don't even have to leave your car, you're like throw it to the thing is
Right.
clearly the most
And it
efficient.
tries to eat your hand.
But sometimes you like to go pick up the
Every
poles,
third time. I
That's
go.
right?
No, I agree.
So like sometimes.
And that's the time
You need
space.
Exactly,
Yes.
time space, yeah.
But
But
I
it would be
do-
nice if they had a drive up.
It would really be nice if they had a drive up. Is that not possible for the?
We can look into it, and see where the drop box is. And
I like
so we are kind of at least recommending the purple area to be kind of the one with circulation. And the purpose of that is to essentially kind of extend that pickup and drop off area for the purposes that I mentioned a little bit earlier. So I made a note of that. We can kind of look into that. And then my last point about sort of time restricted spaces, I think when we were having that conversation, we being staff, I think we were kind of also taking into account some of the programs that might require maybe like an hour or an hour and a half. So that kind of accommodates those people as well. So the 2 hour parking, you know, it's not necessarily just geared towards the libraries, but more so just kind of a little bit of the high turnover for some of the programs that might happen there too. So
I'm actually
That's
wondering
kinda
what,
why.
sorry to interrupt. I'm wondering what percentage of the parking, so when you talk about 2 hour parking being kind of short term, it makes me think you're expecting a lot of the other parking to be used by employees. Or
not
less?
necessarily, probably some employees, but probably more so, I guess, patrons of the program, kids, parents,
It's trans.
community.
Could there be a sign that in the gray area that said something
Yeah.
like patrons of MPPC? You know, something like that, because what I'm envisioning is this overflow problem we are discussing going from the blue
Mhm.
and from the to the gray,
Overflow from Beechwood?
the overnight parking, yeah.
Oh, from the overnight parking.
The overnight
Oh, okay.
parking, like, people will abide
Yeah.
by the fact that the blue is now school parking, it's recognized as such with signage.
Mhm.
And they're gonna say, I'm not gonna park there because I can't be out by 6 AM when the students arrive,
Mhm.
so I'm gonna go to the gray spots. And maybe the gray spots need to be outlined as MPCC parking.
Yeah, well, I think that conversation, I would probably say we probably want to take a step back and maybe even think about whether or not we even want to entertain overnight parking to begin with. I think that's basically one of the questions that we're looking for feedback tonight.
My concern was, you know, it adds another 20 cars theoretically to the peak load, during which time kids are moving in and out of there.
Right.
And it's going the other way.
Right.
And it just, it seems like, I mean, it looks, I wouldn't want to go to Shoreline. I mean, I'd go to Shoreline before I go to there, right? Trying to get out for a concert, trying to get out, because it says a major choke point there, right?
Right, yeah, and one of the things that, you know, as we kind of talk this out loud here, obviously, would be, you know, if the kind of the desire is to, let's open it up and have overnight parking be allowed. Like I said, mentioned before, we're gonna need to change the ordinance, so there is certainly stipulations that we can put in there to kind of highlight that enforcement. I think Belinda talked about enforcement, you know, being in a muni code essentially would allow enforcement to be, I guess, able in this case. I think right now there's kind of a gray area, so enforcement isn't really as frequent or even being allowed. But if that's the desire and ultimately that's what gets approved, we can put those requirements in there and make it and essentially codify.
Enforceable.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Maybe we
That's
would
very
require
well
them
explained.
to
Okay.
leave by 6 AM or something like that. If not, you get a ticket, something like that.
And
I'm
somehow
throwing-
prioritize it for the safety of the kids and not pick up the kids and that type of thing. Just make it,
Right.
if it's gonna be overnight parking, just try to get it away from the kids. I would. yeah.
Right, so yeah, so the very first question I would ask the commission would be like, is this something we want to entertain? Or do we want to allow overnight parking or do we not allow overnight
I mean, it
parking?
sounds like you are allowing overnight
Yeah,
parking.
yeah.
So the question is really, do we want to make the Muni code more explicit
Right.
I
or no?
I wouldn't say we allow, it's more like there's nothing we can do.
Right, so
I would
that's,
put it that
I
way.
mean, it's not forbidden, it's not in the movie code, we
Right.
can't do it.
It's, I would kind of say, loophole, if you will.
But if you.
It's not that we're encouraging or we're discouraging, it's just there's nothing we can do.
So if you put a sign up that said no overnight parking, it's not enforceable.
Not enforceable. Yeah. That's,
The old sign used to say, I'm trying to find the old sign on my phone,
Right.
used to say no overnight parking as you drove into the lot.
Right.
And it's all enforcement. I would love that people would say, oh, I can't get my car out and I don't need it till 7:30. I won't park in the school area. They ignore the signs.
yeah.
It
So
doesn't
codifying it would
really
allow
needs
enforcement.
enforcement.
Hmm.
We have students write really nice notes and leave them on the dashboard, on the windshield, saying, I need to be able to get to school safely. Would
That's
you
not
please
something
not move
students
your
should have
car?
to do.
Well, they write notes, I put them on.
So what are the safety issues? Is it to do with, I'm curious.
Are people in the cars? Is that what you're
Yeah,
asking?
yeah, I'm curious about the actual safety, like,
Or is it more like the abandonment of a car?
It's some of that, and it is our way, so at the top
Sure.
is the entrance to our school,
Okay.
right kind of where that D is.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Oh,
So-
oh,
our cars are gonna drive in. Staff needs to park, drop off kids. You've got parents who have got kindergartners, they wanna park to be able to walk their student and their child. to school.
yeah.
So.
Okay.
um,
It doesn't sound like a good idea, the overnight parking to me. I mean, that's kind of what I feel a little bit. The other thing is, this is an interesting, I feel like I've gotten to know this, the uses here and what the design purposes and goals are. So thank you very much for this particular graphic. This is, I mean, though you're in the early stages of the conversation, you were saying we're sort of only adding the library. This is just a complex, high usage, lots of different kinds of usage, complex like area. And it's only gonna get more that way and attract more people and new programs will flow out and everything else. We don't even know what's gonna happen as this gets more popular and more things start occurring. And so part of me feels like, going into this, should we just establish a bright line and say like, we don't even know how much more parking we need here or how much more use we're gonna have. And so any other use that's not related to this really can't take place within this area, which would mean overnight parking.
Certainly. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think
That's
that's-
kind of where I'm coming out, but that's just my sense. Anyone disagree or agree with that? We want to kind of get a sense of the commission's
I
feedback.
kind of hung up a little bit on a couple of things, but I don't need this, there's a lot of other stuff we need to discuss. So I might abstain from that part of the vote.
Okay, no problem.
And
No problem.
super, yeah.
Here, if I might, I think one thing that'll be helpful, and maybe Kevin would be helpful to go back to the prior slide, because just keeping in mind that, the notion tonight was like, what are all the things that we should be thinking about? And there won't be any, I mean, we'd love some direction from you all tonight, but we also would love like questions that you want answered, right? So that when we come
Okay.
back with any action that you would recommend, and then you'll be recommending ultimately to the council to make action, sort of helpful to have from you, here's some things, because some of the questions I think you're like, well, if it's like this, then I want this, right? So it's like, maybe let's focus on the if it's like part of that so that we can then kind of go dig into that a little bit, get you some more complete answers, and then that'll help sort of inform a future recommendation that you can make to us.
So I have a totally controversial question, or it's gonna sound like a leading question or a mean question that's not intended to be so. I'm just thinking about city policy. Do we have other places in our city where we have private institutions using public parking lot sort of exclusively or having exclusive access to the public parking?
Exclusive access.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm just thinking like Draker's has a private parking lot, but if we had some section of the public downtown parking lot saying these spaces reserved for Draker's customers. And we do have that in some places. I feel like I'm just trying to kind of think comprehensively about what's the precedent we'd be setting if we set aside a part of a public facility parking lot for a private school? And do we do that in other places? And
Right,
what
so,
does that mean?
right, so one of the things, I guess,
Which is not to say that it shouldn't be, I'm just thinking.
It's just-
right,
Yeah,
if I'm not clear, then definitely apologize. So when I say prioritizing, that we're basically encouraging people to not park there during 8 AM to 3
Oh,
PM.
so it's sort of a
We're not restricting
got it.
people.
It's sort of
not
like the
to
no
be-
through traffic signs in Atherton.
Right.
where nobody's actually gonna prevent you from driving on that
Right,
street.
exactly.
Okay, okay, got
It's a
it, yeah.
suggestion. It's a
Right,
suggestion.
so
Okay,
thank you for that.
Got it, okay,
clarifying
understood,
question. I
understood.
wasn't sure.
All right, that,
And as Kevin kept saying, past practices, I mean,
Yeah.
in our use agreement with the city,
Mhm.
when we purchased the property, was that we would have use.
Yeah,
of
yeah.
the park.
yeah, and every time you have a development agreement, those things get baked out, so I wanted to understand more about, yeah, that makes sense.
So maybe to focus the discussion in the way that he was suggesting, we just talk about the proposals that you got on the table in terms of, you know,
Yeah.
the timed parking and limited time pass through and all that kind of thing.
Yeah.
We express an opinion about it and we ask if there's anything else we'd like the staff to do to
help, you know,
research. or
right, to help
advance
you
the
make
notion.
that final decision.
Right.
Come February.
Right.
Right, additional information that you're looking for, you
Mhm.
know, analysis, any type of feedback, we'll take them in right now, that will help you make that decision in February.
So let's start with the hardest one, which I think is this overnight parking issue. I mean, did we tie it up? I don't know, but in terms of what I think he was asking for,
Mhm.
in terms of what other research could you do? I don't know, but I know that in the Middle Avenue discussion, that whole thing with the council around, like, did you do enough outreach?
Mhm.
So is there any possibility that as we propose something around overnight parking, we should be doing more public outreach or surveying around who's using this public parking, overnight
Yes.
parking and why?
Yes.
Yeah, we can, so.
I mean, we don't know right now because it's not being used, is the challenge.
Right, well, right, not
Yeah.
being used right now, obviously, but I think we have plenty of record previously to kind of support the statements that we're making tonight. So, yeah, so definitely we'll welcome that statement in terms of public outreach that we have done thus far to this meeting. I think early November, we sent out a flyer to essentially all of terminal plus maybe if you go, sorry, I actually have a slide that represents sort of the notification that we send out for this meeting, but it'll help me kind of identify what has been done as well. So,
Okay.
So the red area basically received a notification about the meeting tonight specifically. But like I said, earlier November, we did send out a flyer that basically talk about the commencement of the parking management plan. Highlight a couple of things that we're going to talk about and, you know, welcome feedback. And that flyer got sent to all of terminal plus the red area, I think, plus a little bit up to Hill, I think. So kind of that 500 feet plus all the terminal. And then as part of this meeting, we also sent a postcard and also there was a MPCC email list because we have a project website. So we send the meeting information to that email list. There's also an MPCC group that kind of explicit. So we notified them as well. And then lastly, we also sent out a next door post on Monday about this meeting.
What about the fire marshal or I mean, that's bound Beechwood, right? There's a fire, I mean, the fire
Yeah,
district probably has opinions about what they want to see in the parking lot for circulation or safety.
Yeah,
They
no,
have-
they're definitely
they
part
can-
of the review process, kind of internally speaking. So yeah, so there's kind of a little bit of a step there, definitely a stakeholder, key stakeholder in the review process. So, but I mean, we definitely can kind of explore between now to February, you know, like do we just send out another round of postcard? But it sounds like maybe some additional outreach would be nice. So we can certainly do that as well.
So was the outreach so far, the nature of the outreach so far has been, hey, we're talking about the parking plan.
Right.
Come if you have any input.
Right, email, phone call, any feedback. And so far of all that outreach, I believe we have received one email, which didn't say yay or nay to overnight parking, just you should look into that. And that was one feedback that we got.
I wonder if Vice Mayor Taylor would have ideas about whether or not, I mean, since it's her district, and she's very, you know, familiar with the neighbors, and she might have ideas about if that's not very much feedback, right? So another question would be whether or not Belhaven Action, which does a lot of door knocking and walking in the neighborhood and connecting with people in other ways beyond mail.
Yeah.
It might be good to check in with Fairhaven Action and see what they
Yes,
would recommend.
Yeah, so
Yes.
they were part of the email list, and I believe the comment about the using the construction parking for
Mhm.
future parking came from a member of the docket.
Okay, very good.
Mhm.
Yeah.
I think what I was getting at partly is that,
Involved in that.
so we asked, and appropriately, asked kind of an open-ended question.
Yeah.
And we didn't really say what the topics were. We're looking for, feedback around. Is there a sort of a more slightly advanced outreach would be, what do y'all think about overnight parking? You know what I mean? Do you need it or not, or why, and who's using it, and all that kind of stuff. And that might not just be the residents, that would, I believe, probably appropriately include like the other Beechwood School or the community center and those people who overnight parking, in fact, and sort of taking more of a focus on that issue and getting feedback on that issue. Does that sound like a good idea or an appropriate idea or not so much? I'm just curious. I don't want to stir it up, but I just want the staff to feel like, the outreach was performed in some way, but I'm not trying to stir it up or
Yeah, yeah.
overemphasize it either.
Yeah, I do, like, there's part of me that worries, like, this conversation is going to create more
Okay.
people who need to park. in that.
Okay.
I'm like, wow, I didn't know there was a place you could park
Okay.
overnight, not just ticket.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
Good to know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Out of town roads, I know where to go now.
Yeah.
So like, but
Like hiding information is never a solution. though,
Right, right,
So I
right.
mean, so
I understand.
not talking about it, so.
And
yeah.
just to that point, just to clarify, all of the outreach material that we have sent out thus far explicitly highlight the main topic. So we highlighted the
Okay.
fact that we're going to talk about time restriction. We highlighted the fact we're going to talk about prioritization
Okay.
for certain land uses.
Fair.
Overnight parking was
Okay.
explicitly highlighted, so not hiding anything in this case.
I think that's really
those
important
are
for
the-
us to know,
Right. so those were
having
included.
not, I don't live in the neighborhood.
And I didn't hear any feedback about overnight parking, and I'm sure that if it were
Uh-huh.
a topic that was,
Okay,
I'm sure that somebody.
okay. Well, that make that, all right.
Yeah.
Then I think you asked for feedback about that topic.
I'm curious about the prioritization. Is that something we do in other places?
Needham Park, we prioritize parking for Little House. We have a sign.
It's prioritized.
Yeah.
I remember thinking I couldn't park there.
Yeah, I thought it was
Yeah,
limited
okay,
too. I
so-
thought it
so
was
just- yeah, no,
restricted.
That's good to know.
It's
Like,
interesting, yeah.
Kind of goes back to the whole designating parking explicitly for private entities.
Sure, sure.
So, like, on that note, though, the time restricted,
Mhm.
or should I not move on from that yet? Should we just
Also,
stay
maybe
on
let's
overnight
stick
parking?
with overnight just so that I have
Well,
a clear,
well,
just
I-
more outreach.
I don't think we need to do more outreach.
Yeah, it kind of
But-
feels like one of those things. I hear you on the bright line.
Mhm.
I mean, there's part of me that, I don't know if you guys have ever driven past an empty bank parking lot with a
Ah, yes.
clear, like, we're gonna have a predatory towing company come and tow your car.
Bank
Yes,
of America-
yes.
Bank of America.
Yeah, and it always bugs me because it's kind of like, what's the harm? Like, the bank is closed.
Right.
Mhm.
And this is space
Just
that
unused
people
blacktop.
need, right?
Yeah.
And so, and like,
Mhm.
in general, I think
Mhm.
we pay too much of our community and we should be sharing things more, is my orientation, but I can understand the difficulty of, not having a law and people taking advantage of it and it not being sort of like equal opportunity. It's not like we're renting parking spaces out overnight with clear stipulations about like, here's the space. If you need a space, you can buy a parking permit and you can use it overnight and you can definitely not be in the place where the kids are gonna need to walk to school and you can definitely not. I mean, if we were doing something like that, I guess I'd feel more comfortable with it, because then it's not just some people know about it and some people don't, and.
Well, because to get those permits, you have
Yeah.
to register and put information.
Right, I mean, I'm not categorically averse, I guess, to the idea that we should be able to use paved empty space for parking when it's not being used.
As long
But
as
I
it's
guess-
channeled away from the students.
But it should be a
As long-
program, it should be
yeah.
something that's administered.
It feels like it should be an actual thing, and right
Yeah.
now it's just this weird,
Yeah, it's
Loophole.
it's arbitrage.
yeah, yeah, and I'm
Yeah.
not crazy about that.
Right.
Either
Okay,
way.
so
Agreed.
let's have the city explore, like, not like I mean, maybe it's an overnight parking ban, maybe it's, but maybe it is, like, there's ways to like manage the parking by having people purchase.
Maybe it's the same overnight permit system they use for everybody right now.
Or I'm thinking, for example, sorry, I'm taking us really far off topic, but one thing that I learned that that kind of blew my mind and not in a happy way was that the Haven House, right on the other side of the freeway, has too many cars. It's a transitional homeless shelter. So there's 24 apartments or something like that, and there are people who live there who need a place to put their cars, and there's not enough parking. So they've been parking on this dead end street and getting tickets overnight. And like,
Mhm.
boy, it's like, I feel like if we could be ticketing other people for overnight parking, maybe not, let's not go first to the place, the dead end street where the homeless shelter is. But maybe, maybe Haven House could avail themselves, for example, of some of this parking.
But perhaps that goes back to being more explicit in the
Yeah,
signage,
exactly.
which is what I was saying.
Yeah.
It's, if you just said it's school parking, that's very vague. But if an overnight user understood that at 7 AM, the kids are coming in and restrictions are gonna apply
Mhm.
between those hours.
But I think you did mention.
But maybe
sorry.
that's not enough.
Okay,
I-
okay,
But it
okay.
needs to be legally binding, though, right?
I think so.
Yeah, and
Right.
and it needs to be
Enforced.
Enforced, yeah.
Mhm.
So, well, there's other places people can park besides the school park, all right? I mean, they
You
can
mean
park
like within
the
the lot
the
itself?
massive lot, right?
Mhm.
So I'm just not quite
Yeah,
sure
I
why
think
they
they
usually
will
say
go-
just don't park there.
I
Just
know, I
flat
do
out,
think,
There's
I mean,
plenty.
we could
and
even put a gate there. This is the other thing I
That's
was
what I
thinking,
thought.
was that you could actually, it looks like there's a special entrance to the school place. And if we really wanted to be serious about it, we could basically,
Or just
We
encourage people to
But
park.
we also want to be good partners, and when there are soccer tournaments, there that week, over the weekends and evening events,
Oh,
we don't want to, we want to encourage, we want to be good partners, so of course, we don't need that space after 3:30.
I don't think we need to necessarily hammer
Solve it,
out the
yeah.
details right
Yeah,
now,
yeah.
but I mean, and before I summarize, maybe I can just turn it over to Commissioner Coleman real quick on the Zoom, if he has any additional feedback. Other than that, I will kind of maybe give it a quick summary of what I'm hearing. Okay, I'm gonna take that silence as no additional feedback from you, Commissioner Coleman. So I think there's kind of collectively speaking, at least a desire to explore if we were to allow overnight parking, how that's going to look structurally speaking, but also, what are some of the perhaps programs that we can go through. So we can certainly take that feedback, again, converse with Melinda from Beechwood, converse with our community service department, who kind of knows the lay of the land really well, to kind of come up and then,
in the PD.
yeah, in the PD, if it does become some sort of a program, usually it's managed by our police department as well. So, but it sounds like there is some sort of a desire to at least explore that a little bit, so we can come back in February with maybe some outlines of what we are thinking of, and then we can kind of go from there as well. But I think we got enough feedback in terms of some of the key points that we want to hit with those restrictions.
Yeah.
Okay, awesome. So that would be kind of the overnight aspect of things. So that kind of the hard questions, and let's maybe move on to the easier ones. Standard parking, like I said, the prioritization of spaces for Beechwood, for senior, for time restricted. I didn't really hear any opposition nor any additional.
I would like to voice my enthusiasm.
Okay.
Yeah, I would.
So those are.
Yeah,
I feel like the time restriction ones, it seems to me that most people going there are going there for like an hour and a half or 2 hours, right? Like
Mhm.
library,
Take a swim.
class, community center,
Shower.
like workout.
Mhm.
Senior center, maybe people go hang out all day.
Senior center, right? I believe our senior center program ends around 2:30, 3 o'clock-ish, if I remember correctly from my colleagues. So, kind of again, I think the beginning time would probably be up for discussion for now. And I think some of them do kind of get shuttle service
I was
into the
gonna ask
facility
about
as well.
shuttle.
Certainly, there's some drivers, and also we have the ADA spaces, I think, somewhat with the senior center in mind as well. Although
right.
not
Yeah.
necessarily by name or by nature, but
So I guess, like, I was thinking time restricted was more like those parents who had to like sign out their kids from the preschool, and so they were
That
going to
too.
park to
That
run
too.
in and sign their kid out, or
Right.
park so you can do this other thing.
Right.
I mean,
Yeah.
for the most part, and like, you might correct me, if I'm wrong about this, Linda, but like, I mean, my husband goes down to Kelly Park a lot to huck discs, so he usually goes kind of in the morning, but you know, other times of day, and, he didn't see, we chatted about this parking thing, and he didn't seem to think like we would ever have a problem with parking. Which seems interesting, like, I know in the sum of all the times I've ever gone down to Oneida Harris, like, even for city council meetings that were pretty packed, like, you could always find parking. So I think, and a lot of community members walk because, you know, it's a hassle to drive down there, so like, I don't know, it just seems like it would be nice to have a few spaces near the things you would need to, like near the, you know, towards the front where you could just quickly run in, sign your kid out, and back in your car. I do wonder about the enforcement piece though, because like, again, a 20-minute space is nice, but if there's no way to, I mean, people are just gonna park where they gotta park, I guess. And
Right.
it's
Yeah.
just a suggestion, and it's nice if people follow it, but there's nobody gonna be out there to like chalk the tires. in 20
Right.
minutes.
Yeah,
Right.
I think with the 20-minute, you know, I think there certainly could be enforced as well, like the chalking of tire. I don't know how frequent. I mean, those are things that we can
Right.
talk with.
That's a
That's a
lot,
heavy
yeah,
enforcement,
and that
right?
might be, you know, it might be like 30 minutes, you know, it's just, I'm thinking much more the shorter time, because most usage doesn't feel like it's gonna be 6 hours.
Right. So is the feedback then maybe explore if
Yes.
2 hours, or is 2 hours good enough time, or are we thinking about maybe explore a little bit shorter?
The folks providing their services could tell us that, right?
I agree.
Right, so yeah, so
yes.
the
I
2
mean,
hours.
just like what.
Right, the 2 hour number that I'm throwing out there is something that our colleague recommended as well.
Okay.
So, but I think there's always opportunity to kind of let it play out as well, right? We can always.
Try
It's
it.
also
exercise,
adjustable,
right?
it's easily
Yeah.
adjustable.
Exactly, we can
Yeah.
always adjust that. That's not a set in
Yeah.
stone.
I have a question about employee parking versus customer parking, and I'm wondering sort of how many employees that would be expected to be there for a long time, would we think would be there, and is there a universe in which, for example, we can encourage employees who are gonna be parking for more than 4 hours at a time to park at Kelly? At the sort of, so that the
Yeah.
people who are coming in and out of the library or the
Yeah.
drop off or whatever.
Easy access.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Is
I
that
mean, I don't have the exact breakdown
Yeah.
at this moment in time, but I think there's a feedback that's very
I agree.
very much makes sense. Well,
Especially if
I'm gonna
Kelly
write that
Field
down
isn't
and
very
I'll talk to our colleague.
Yeah.
Right, as
about
long
that,
as it's before like that 5 o'clock hour. 'cause
Right,
then,
where
like,
the
Kelly
kids start
Park
coming
gets
in,
quite
yeah.
full.
Sure.
If I can kind of interject here a little bit, it was brought to my attention that someone that just joined us online, probably a Omar, I'm gonna butcher the last name, is a Shrek, is a regular participant of the MPCC item. So through the chair, if you don't mind, maybe open up the public comment period a little bit to see if he has anything to
Yes,
say
Kevin,
about that.
please take
Okay.
that.
So Omar, if you can hear me, I guess I'll just let you make the decision. If you want to speak, go ahead and raise your hand. And then I will open up the public comment for you. If not, if I don't see a hand raised, then I will just continue the conversation. But anytime you want to speak up, feel free to kind of raise your hand. So that just kind of-
On his Zoom.
on his Zoom, right? So
Or-
there's a raise hand feature. It looks like he's attending by Zoom
Okay.
because I can see the name, not by phone number. But in case, Omar, if you're
Okay.
attending by phone number, you can dial 9 to kind of, it's a virtual hand feature that we have from a landline and a cell phone. So just throwing that out there for you, Omar, in case you want to speak. We can open up the public comments. But yes.
On the gray spots, can't you put a patron signage there?
A patron signage as in designate prioritizing parking for patron, definitely.
To
As-
discourage
as a-
employee
As
and
opposed to
encourage patron.
employees, yeah. Yeah, I mean, certainly they are city employees, so we can always just talk to them
Yeah, I tell what to do. yeah.
about this type of stuff, right? It's
Mhm,
not,
mhm.
yeah.
Um,
Try to
so-
avoid putting too many signs. People don't really
Oh.
like signs all too much.
Well, I think that this has been very thoughtful in terms of, yes, do we need priority spaces for senior center? Makes tons of sense to me. Yes, do we need these potential time restricted spaces? I think that makes a lot of sense to me because you're telling people, hey, you might just be in and out. And that's what this is. This is about you're using parking because you need it while you're here. You know, this just isn't a
Right.
general parking lot. You're continuing to reinforce that message, which I like. I think one of the questions I had though was that when we first started, there were a couple of different uses that you described as sort of pickup drop off kind of uses.
Right.
One was the food harvest.
Right.
One was like, maybe if people are being dropped off at the senior center, maybe is there a parking space for the shuttle bus? Does it need a parking space in the senior shuttle bus, or do they just pull over? So I think one of the things I would say, and I don't know if this is for, you know, feedback for staff, whatever, is
Yeah.
just to make sure to explore in a focused way, drop off uses,
Mhm.
you know, and if we're thinking that, for example, like, let's say the senior center, is it just a drop off or is there actually a space needed to drop them off? You know,
Yeah.
do some of the drop off uses like senior center collide with the food harvest drop off? You know, like how is that all gonna work? Because right now it looks like we really have one drop off, which is that purple curve, right?
Right.
that the drop-off
And
area?
that
Okay.
curve, I would say it's probably about maybe 125 feet to 150 feet or so,
Okay.
kind of linearly speaking.
And where's the drop off for the childcare?
So the childcare, typically what happens is, so similar to senior where they have a shuttle, that shuttles quite a few of them, but then the kids that, so we're kind of anticipating that they would also use this purple area
Yeah.
as a drop off, because kind of the time is not necessarily the same time, like the food delivery time usage doesn't coincide with
That's good.
the after shower program. So
Okay.
there's no really conflict in that.
And no conflict with like the
Right.
child program in the senior center.
Right, and with the
Okay.
child program, you know, you can only really have pull up if you have two parents because you need to sign your kid out.
Mm.
So if you are a one car with a single parent, you probably have to park, you know, walk
Mm.
in versus.
So there's sort of like, and again, I've liked your signage comments a lot because I actually do believe in signage. I think it's important in terms of communicating use. But in this case, is it sort of like, will there be signage saying like pickup drop off area or only? Or like really being clear that that's what this is about? So it sounds like it's going to be used a lot
Yeah,
in the course of the day.
definitely.
Yeah.
I think that's definitely like
Yeah.
you know, the desire is to have the sign that says pick up and drop off.
Yeah.
That wouldn't be a problem. I think I think partially of that is also a curve for the fire. So we might have to go back and explore, but wherever there's a sign that we can put in to clarify that this is pick up and drop off, we'll take that comment.
Okay, and can you find out about, I'm a little bit interested in the bus issue, like if you have a senior shuttle. Sorry, I spent a summer in Colorado running elder hostel for older people,
Right.
and I remember the shuttle bus. Anyway, so is there a need for the shuttle to do anything other than move through? Like, does that shuttle ever have to park? And if so, is that a reserved space of some kind or some dedicated spaces?
Gotcha. Okay.
Because sometimes that's like a difficult get in and get out.
Right.
It's all, yeah,
Especially if you have people in wheelchairs.
yeah, I'm just curious.
Or if the shuttle bus has to park for the period of time they're there and they need a through parking and not the barrier kind of parking where if the van's long and they're in the gray area parking for 2 hours.
So those are information that we'll collect and then use that to sort of strategize and think about the kind of the pick up and drop off space that we're recommending here. So I think those are good.
I have a question. Say I'm on my bike and I'm trying to get to soccer practice.
Right.
Is there a route or is it all through the parking lot to get down there?
To get to Kelly Park,
Yeah.
most likely you just go basically straight in and then kind of that.
Along
easiest
with
path
the call
along-
out, right?
Yeah.
There's
exactly.
no bike route like through.
Mm.
So
Like a
like from
dedicated bike route.
terminal, through to the field.
Right, yeah. So there is, I think the wider area, the sidewalks are pretty wide in this case. But I would say if you are a rider, because we have speed humps, we purposely put in speed humps to sort of reduce the speed, recognizing that there will be some bikers kind of traversing within the area. So that's kind of one of our way of making sure that the cars can't go too fast.
I'm glad you brought that up because that's actually my biggest concern. I'm not actually so worried about people getting to the soccer field. I'm worried about the pool, and I'm especially worried about youth on bikes coming for after school programs because I mean, I don't think even if you put signs up and cattle prods, like I don't think they're gonna go. I don't think they're gonna ride all the way around the parking lot to get to the pool. I think they're gonna dive into the wrong way thing right when the shuttle bus is coming out, oblivious. Because I've literally seen them do this.
But
Right?
there's
There are
another,
these bus stops outside, and I've watched kids like, you know, that I've watched the kid bus tango on both Terminal
Right.
and Del Norte. And with on-street parking, it's especially sketchy, but I really want people to think about how is a 14-year-old on their bike gonna get from either Del Norte or Terminal to the pool or to the makerspace?
Yeah, so
without-
I probably have to kind of look at this a little bit more closely, but I would suspect they don't even really get into the parking lot. They would probably, because this is gonna be a race crosswalk right here. And then I think the main entrance is somewhere like right
they'll
here.
take
Oh,
the
good,
sidewalk.
okay,
So
okay.
they'll probably
So
be,
they'll-
So
they'll
they'll
probably
take
like
that
right
walkway.
here,
Okay, all right.
rather than be in the parking lot, to be
Okay,
honest.
good,
Yeah.
good,
Yeah.
good. So happy to know that.
Yeah.
And any way we can make that normative.
Right,
and-
but
and super obvious and
Yeah.
like if it's the fastest way, then that's what they'll do.
and that is
Right,
sort of
okay.
fastest
And
way.
that,
Yeah.
like, that is the thing, the bike wayfinding, like, I can't emphasize enough, like, all the things that we can do
Right.
to encourage people visiting here to get here in a way that is not a car
Mhm.
is gonna be better.
So how can, looking forward, that, I agree with her comment, and others do as well. I think Brian, you indicated you did, but looking forward into as we present this to the city council, et cetera. Is there time for staff to make specific suggestions around wayfinding, signage, or et cetera, in the area? Maybe that's something you can work on that is pulling, incentivizing people to bike to this area, like.
You
going
know
over
what I wonder
So-
is, Tide kids would be interesting to talk to about this, because there are some kids who are riding their bikes across that bike bridge in the morning. And they're going not to where the library is, but we hope to gather a lot of them at that teen center after school. And so I think it would be nice to get feedback from them, like if you were, what would be sort of optimal bike? Because, you know, they're like water, they flow
Yeah.
to the path of least resistance.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
it might be interesting to partner with Tide to find out what students who commute over the bridge, like if they had a kind of, you know, design thinking opinion about how you would get more people and how you would encourage biking.
Yeah, I think right now they're definitely somewhat restricted to Choco essentially. Yeah, but I think your point is well taken. And we can reach out to Ty and see, and then to the point about wayfinding signs, we do have sort of bicycle wayfinding signs out in the street area, and one of the things that we're looking to as well is, you know, if there's a space, we'll put in, you know, and usually it says, you know, destination,
Yeah.
how many miles, how long you take to bike. You know, we have those wayfinding signs out there for bikes, and our intent is, you know, to maybe swap out some of the, if there's a available slot, we can go ahead and put one in, or maybe swap out.
Maybe superimpose upon the plan what you think the preferred path, bike path route
From
would be.
adjacent.
So the
area.
community has an understanding of,
Yeah.
you know, what it might look like, and the community could respond to it, but somehow because we've got car traffic, we've got bus traffic, but, you know, maybe superimpose the preferred bicycle route through the community and through the MPCC itself.
Can I, if I might share just a quick addition here. So the community center does have a wayfinding plan associated with it and signage that, you know, for not just people walking and biking, but also, but that's something that I think we can look into and probably share so you can see what's
That'd be
been
fantastic.
designed. So
That'd be
that's sort of
fantastic.
part one. And then part two is that I think I really love all the comments and thoughts about sort of the encouragement part of this, right? It's not just what they do when they get there, right? It's like they're getting them there in the first place. And it's probably not just this destination, but it's really all the kind of places in the city. And so that people are trying to get to. So I love those thoughts. I think it's a broader issue. As Kevin says, we do have a fair amount of bicycle wayfinding sign, but I wouldn't say it's in any way comprehensive throughout the city. And as we sort of expand the routes that are available for people to bike, certainly a component of what we need to do is to be thinking about, wayfinding and other encouragement, some of the other encouragement things we can do. So I think some of those probably go beyond this item, but great, keep that kind of feedback coming, and we'll, sort of think about how we do that in other programs, or there are also grants that we can pursue to help with some of
Great.
that kind of work as well. So.
Love
And then
that.
just one other observation I wanted to make, sorry, going back a step, is that little purple area that's highlighted on this, that's like a little very short-term pickup drop-off spot. And that would be where I was chatting with my LCS colleagues. So that would be where the senior shuttle would pull up. So it's kind of right in front of the kind of main place that they'd be trying to get to, as I understand it. So there's sort of provision for that kind of connection.
And so not really a need for a parking space?
Yeah,
For the
that's my
shuttle at this
understanding.
point?
The shuttle itself would not need a specific parking space.
Okay.
'Cause,
Okay.
when it's picking up and dropping off, you want it as close as possible, obviously.
Okay.
to the destination.
I think I'm haunted by the fact that that guy who was associated with the Rosner Center said at the meeting, no one ever talked to you about, like whatever it was.
It turns out they did talk to the staff.
I'm
They
sure,
just didn't
but I
have to-
just
yeah.
want to make sure we're checking all those boxes around like
Yeah, yeah.
specific usage. So
No, yeah.
further where I'm coming from.
I have like concerns based on my 400% zoom in on this funky place, the curve at Terminal.
Mhm.
And I'm wondering if you can put that up, like, so it's actually the thing in the staff report.
Okay.
I see a lands of PG&E parking space that cuts in at the apex of the turn. I see a bus, which I'm assuming is where the Samtrans bus stop is. Can you zoom in as far as you can on this? Sorry, I'm being incredibly.
So like this
picky
area.
here.
basically.
Yeah, that whole area. So I'm concerned about the fact that there's a bus stop, two-way traffic, a parking lot exit, and kids
It's a choke point.
and kids that are gonna be like cutting like that corner where it says PG&E easement.
Mhm.
People are gonna be coming from multiple directions, at least two directions, as far as I can tell, in vehicles. But then there's kids and pedestrians that are gonna be turning left into the pool.
Yeah.
And I'm just wondering what your safety plan is for this section. This, not just, that where you're hovering, and then that crosswalk just past it where people are coming around a corner and kids are gonna be, if you're coming in on a bike, if you're coming on a terminal, your goal is to get to the pool
Right.
and you're 14, 99 out of 100 are not gonna actually stop and look 5 different ways to see whether there's a car or a bus or a shuttle coming. They're just gonna kind of go.
Mhm.
And I'm wondering, is there anything we can do about this to make it slightly less crazy?
So your orientation would be a kid biking
I mean, I'm
towards
thinking about
towards the
kids biking.
MPCC versus cars trying to get out of MPCC.
Yeah, and cars coming out of that lands of PG&E space,
Right.
where there's a bus maybe so that they can't actually have total visibility into who's
I see what
coming.
you're saying.
And maybe they're
Gotcha.
going around the bus, but then this,
That lands of
Right.
PG&E looks like great.
it does, but doesn't it, this makes me uncomfortable.
Yeah.
I actually think it's.
So,
really good
yeah,
for
so
talking
the,
about who's-
Mhm.
I think the image might be a little bit deceiving in terms of how narrow terminal, that section of terminal looks. It's essentially kind of what's out there right now.
Yeah,
And it's actually pretty wide.
It kind of widens out there.
Even with the
yeah.
buses, to be honest with you.
the visibility.
But I think that point is well taken, that we can see in terms of like designating where the parking spaces, or not parking spaces, where the buses can stop versus kind of giving that visibility of cars trying to get out of that parking space and being able to see what's to the right.
Maybe limiting it to right turn only exit from that parking space, for example, could
Versus-
simplify it a little bit.
Oh, versus making a left out of the parking lot into the
Like, I don't know
MPCC?
why you would, but
Oh, I
like,
see. Oh,
I
okay.
don't know, just thinking about how to simplify some of the turning movements.
Yeah.
In this area, or moving the bus stop so that it's not hindering visibility for turning.
Yeah, I think that's
Just, I mean, I'm sure that y'all are on this and this is super preliminary, but.
Right.
I can foresee that being super complicated and.
yeah, and I think that point is well taken. So we can definitely explore from a kind of site visibility standpoint. I think
Also-
you're also right. I'm not sure how many cars actually would make that movement
I don't know either,
as
but-
well. So if it does become an issue, we can, like I said, we can always make it a right turn only restriction. as
Well, then the other thing to think about is are teenagers arriving as kids from Beechwood are leaving?
Mhm.
And does there need to almost be like traffic direction, like almost like a
Yes.
crossing guard type person there at peak time at like 3 o'clock or something like that to make sure that if you have a steady stream of drivers leaving the parking lot coming out of Beechwood, that you have people coming in on bikes or cars to go to their afternoon swim lesson
Mhm.
or the maker space or whatever.
Yeah.
Like, how are we navigating that?
Yeah, I mean, we're definitely gonna see some, I think there's definitely some cross traffic going on there. And that's one of the reasons why we decided to kind of upgrade a standard crosswalk to a race crosswalk at
Yeah,
that
that's
location.
smart.
So that way, it really kind of forces cars to essentially kind of slow down as you're approaching this crosswalk.
Could we even
here.
use
Yeah.
stop signs?
You-
I mean,
you
I'm
put a
thinking now
stop
about
sign.
like the Safeway parking
But
lot.
I'm
for
not
example.
sure, so as I think about it, I'm not sure if Beechwood School is out at 3 o'clock.
3:30 for our middle school. but
3:30.
3:00.
Oh, okay. 3:30 is later.
Yeah,
Like
right?
3 o'clock, I couldn't see a lot of overlap because no other school is out early enough for
Mhm.
kids to already be at the
Mhm.
NBCC to interfere with dismissal of Beechwood. But 3:30 gets a little closer
It gets
because
very-
then you would have, like, we get out at 3, so
Mhm.
by the time that shuttle bus gets from
Mhm.
wherever it gets to NPCC,
Mhm.
like,
Or maybe having a stop sign before you come around that corner, so that at least you're stopping before you, instead of just coming whizzing around.
Mhm.
I don't know.
Oh,
Just
I
think
see what
that-
you're saying.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Well,
I-
actually,
I
in the
think
parking
that's
lot.
something that we can kind of.
Okay, that's good.
it's
I'm not,
probably
I
one
don't
of
want
those
to
items we
prescribe,
can-
but I'm sure there are standards and there are
No, I
best
think it's,
practices,
but I think it's
these
good
are
to
the
say
things
specific
that-
things, because as I look at this, like, keep staring and staring, I keep thinking to myself, do we just need to tell them what to do more explicitly,
Well,
in
and-
this area?
And telling kids on bikes what to do is a fruitless cause, but
Right.
but telling adults who pass driver's
Yeah.
exams what to do
Yeah,
with
behind a
their-
wheel.
with their multiple
Mhm.
ton vehicles is.
I have a question. Where's Del Norte in
Del
this?
Norte would be
Right where the
kind of,
number 2 is, the page number.
Okay,
yeah, exactly.
Okay.
that-
Like right here would
when
be Del
that
Norte.
becomes a four-way stop, you actually are gonna more likely have cars back up into the parking lot
Mhm.
because they're all gonna have to stop at that four-way stop. So it's actually, I think at some of those peak times, there's no whizzing out of the parking lot. I think there's gonna be a line.
And we're probably
because
expecting.
That's what four-way stops mean.
Right, and we're probably expecting fairly minimal number of cars making this kind of right turn movement
Oh,
as
really?
well, I think. Yeah, because it's gonna be a one-way circulation, obviously, so everyone is gonna be come out this way, but like if you're coming from Kelly Park, you're not doing this.
No, 'cause that's where
All
the
of these
school
are
drop-off
two-way
are.
circulation. So if you park
So
over
you're going
here,
out there and
right,
down.
and if you're going out, you're probably gonna utilize this section
Mm.
far more than the other section. This is kind of meant to be,
Mm.
if you need to be dropped off, then obviously you would kind of circulate this area. Maybe if you park up here, then your choice of, do I go this way or do I go this way? Maybe it's a little bit
There's fewer.
up to you.
Fewer pedestrians. and
Right.
you,
Right, yeah, so
Yeah.
kind of the design kind of try to concentrate a lot of traffic kind of
you-
going up and down
And you
here.
want to concentrate the traffic that way.
Well, you would put exit signs, right?
I was gonna
Exit-
say, because
Right,
this
right.
sounds like airport
Yeah.
parking when they're like, exit that way, and you just sort of make people do
Yeah.
it.
Right, yeah, and a lot of these people that kind of park there, I'm sorry.
No, you finish. I don't know if I'm
Yeah,
allowed to.
A lot of the people that are gonna park here kind of are gonna be residents, people that know the lay of the land very well from so it's kind of like
Mm.
they generally will know where to go. And this is probably the least conflicted point.
So at Oak Knoll, there is a drop off.
Yes.
And there's a one-way drop off, and there are kids who are constantly turning left against the parents who are exiting the drop off.
It is so
And
bad.
it's so sketchy, and there, and I used to just stand on the corner as
I
the
know.
bike head safety person and tell kids to go to the crosswalk and wait so that they could, and it was like
Yep.
but it was an issue, right? It was
Oh,
like a constant
man.
conflict. You have a stream of cars coming out and you have a stream of kids on bikes coming in. And I just want to, this reminds me of that.
Yeah.
And so I just hope that we have a plan for
Yeah.
how to minimize this left turn.
So I'll let Melinda go and then I can
So
finish
I'll-
up.
Gonna tell you something that's gonna make you even more nervous. I was under the impression that they were moving the bus stop from right there in front of our other building over to the center, is the bus stop going to stay the same place?
Uh,
Right by the
that
letter
bus
S?
is?
Yeah, so the buses are, yeah, it's gonna be right here.
Okay.
Yeah.
I
Kind of where
thought I
where
had
they are
seen
now.
that it once was going to be in the center and that was going to go away. One of the things
Oh.
that is complicated there is that shows one bus.
Yes.
There's often
Two
two
buses.
buses.
Yeah.
And
Oh.
a third in the parking lot waiting, or while the driver's taking a break. So I would suggest asking the bus company, what's the plan?
Right.
Where do you think the better spot is? When you were saying it, you thought it was gonna be moved. which
I
is-
Did you think
I
it was
thought
gonna
that
be here?
they were gonna
Up here?
ensure, yes,
That's what
that's
I thought.
what the
Yeah.
original plan that I once saw.
Mhm,
thought was entertaining, so that the bus stop was
Mm.
being moved off of terminal.
Well, because they're probably going to have to make a loop through the parking lot to turn around and face the right way.
Exactly,
So they already have to go through
they
the
used
parking
to
lot.
have to do that too.
Because they're coming up terminal,
Mhm.
and the only way to be going back down the other way is to loop through the
Correct.
parking lot, so why wouldn't you just put bus stop?
What do you think about that, Kevin Chen?
Yeah, no, I think that's good feedback. I think kind of traditionally speaking, there's always been kind of like you said, the two buses there, and that's why kind of that stretch of terminal to a certain extent is essentially what's going to be out there today. The third bus, I have to look into that. I've always seen two. I haven't seen three.
There,
but
it often is what they call the North Road.
yeah,
Is, back when we had the parking lot, it would often, there'd be one sitting there waiting
Gotcha,
with a guy
yeah.
on, a driver on a break.
We have a really good relationship with Sam Tran as well, so that is certainly something that, if it does become a problem, it's easily, we can pick up the phone and talk to them, and I think there's a couple sort of layover spot that we kind of created as part of this project too, that we can kind of explore those. So we do have a couple alternatives.
Especially if people from the bus are actually planning on accessing all the stuff that's behind the bus.
Right.
Like, this doesn't even necessarily take them to
Yeah,
the places they're trying to go, right?
This is awful
Behind,
long.
like as in Kelly.
Well, or any of the other stuff, it looks like it's.
Yeah.
closer to the building would be ideal, even where the street with the cars on the north side.
Well, again, especially because
They-
while you're sitting on the bus, you're
Right, so-
driving past all the places you want to be.
We can certainly kind of explore
Okay.
a stop per se, but this is not meant to be just like, you can maybe stop and keep moving versus the bus that's shown here is meant to be kind of like a layover where you stay there for a longer period of time.
Oh,
But,
okay.
yeah, but we can, if there's a desire to say, stop right where J is, drop off people and then move on, that's certainly something that we can explore with Sam Trans.
I like that it feels, it makes that whole section that Katie's been drawing our attention to just less complicated.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I
Less
do
stuff
feel,
happening.
like when we have our turning radius laws and things like that, or, I mean, we've seen a lot of these in Blue Streets recently about, park driveway exits and
Yes.
large vehicles parked and visibility.
Yes.
This just seems like a spectacularly less suboptimal place to leave a parked vehicle compared to some other places that have longer straightaways back by Kelly Park, or something like that, right? Where at least, you're not,
Sure.
you don't have like
Agreed.
everybody trying to get to the pool.
Now,
Yeah.
Katie, with also the
That's good.
feedback you had about this particular area,
Yeah.
Kevin, do you feel like, did you get anything on the table that you wanted, that you were hoping staff could look into more or debate and discuss among yourselves, but did you feel like you got those specific things out? Like, I know you said a stop sign.
Yeah, I just think, I just think really looking at that from a 400% zoomed in lens and thinking about the micro details.
Yeah.
I mean, just,
Okay.
which is what schools do, right? When they're planning circulation for their drop-offs and pickups and.
Yeah.
I think that's the level of detail orientation when you've got a lot of kids coming in.
I think for now, we can definitely look at least from a site visibility standpoint of
Yeah.
exiting the PG&E lot relative to where the buses are. I think that's something that we can explore.
Yeah.
The stop signs that you talk about, I think those like, later on, if we want to add those in, shouldn't be a problem at all to just kind of put that in there. So I think for now, we can definitely explore kind of the site visibility that you're talking about. And then those the restrictions, like the no left turn coming out of the sort of the land of the PG&E lot, so to
Yeah.
speak. And then the stop sign coming from those ADA spaces. I think that's what you're talking about, right? Where that is.
Yeah, I mean, I don't even mean to be that prescriptive,
No,
but I
no.
would just say like, yeah,
Those are good ideas.
Right.
thinking
Yeah.
about ways to.
Yeah.
Make
Make
people
turning
down,
movements
yeah.
more predictable and conscious
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I
and
think
increase visibility.
right, yeah, and I think some of the kind of the nature of the street design here is also kind of a little different than the Oakno location that you're talking about, which I know exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah, there's like a bit in there too.
Right, yeah, versus like here is fairly narrow in a sense that the bikers and the cars are almost like in front of each other versus being able to be side by side in this case. Also, the volume is probably not going to be. I mean, I recognize that Beechwood have 3:30 and then kids will be coming in, but they're also coming from different direction versus in this case they're all in the Oakno case they're all going in the same direction, so the conflict is there. So, but the point is well taken.
Well, Ben, Kevin, sounds like you've provided your closing remarks and no official action is
Yeah.
needed.
Can I ask one more question, Kevin? It's
course.
such a small one.
Yeah.
We were talking about the time restriction thing. That's really just referring to those 4 spaces.
For
right?
now,
Like,
yes,
all the
that's-
rest of the parking lot is not time restricted.
Exactly.
Okay.
That is our
Yeah,
intent.
that's, then,
Yeah.
yeah. Then that, I definitely think it should be shorter than 2 hours. Particularly because the rest of the parking lot, you can park how long you want.
Yeah.
And so I feel like someplace where you only can park there for a few minutes.
Yeah.
Just would be helpful.
Okay.
For people who just need to run in for a minute, and it will keep them from trying to park in that purple area while they just run
Yeah.
in to do the thing they want to run in.
Yes,
Yes.
another good point.
Yeah.
A quick question I
Because
forgot to ask
everybody's
about
got something.
EV spaces. I guess you're feeling good about that.
EV spaces. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I just have to do this thing.
They're all provided in there and you're feeling.
Oh,
good
yeah,
about that.
Yeah, they have some like, so that at the first row.
Yeah.
There's one ADA and the rest are EV. I think there's some more EV kind of along the other roads as well.
Oh, here's what I was gonna say. The one way you can definitely influence which way cyclists go is by where you put bike racks.
Right.
So putting the bike racks in the place where you want bikes to head.
Yeah, and I think kind of where the frontage is relative to where the parking lot is, and kind of to the point about kids kind of taking the shortest route. I mean, in this case, that kind of leans towards the design almost
Yeah,
as well. So I'm hopefully not a lot of conflict within the actual parking lot itself.
I think the other thing that the other recency thing I've been thinking about with these cyclists again, kids on bikes, is that difference between the bike bridge on this side of 101 versus the other side. And on that other side, there's always stop for cars and there's not a stop sign for the bikes. And we seem to have fewer bike car collisions there than we do on the side where the bikes are expected to stop at the end of the bike bridge, but they never do. And the drivers don't stop either. So I feel like, figuring out how to get the adults to be proceeding from a standstill as opposed to expecting the kids to be super.
It's gonna cut down on the cars, driving up Page or Ringwood.
Yeah. That's it. Sorry, I know we're going on about
Sorry.
this.
No, I mean, those are great feedback.
Okay,
Yeah,
thank you
sure.
very much.
Mhm.
All right then. So
Awesome.
I guess we're ready
That's
to
everything.
move on to our next item.
Okay.
Okay.
Sounds good.
Thanks for thinking so carefully about this.
Yeah. For seeking out our.
I love
opinion,
that we're
absolutely.
doing a study session before we are being asked to vote on something.
Yeah, no, I mean, like I say, it's kind of the study session,
Thank you for
fairly
coming.
new for
Yeah,
the
thank
commission,
you.
but it's meant to be
Yeah.
kind of have
Look
this
at us.
dialogue. So
We're in like little
Oh, man, I
boxes
don't like
now.
yeah, there's 3 boxes, limited to 3. So whoever speaks gets to jump in that box. That's why I try to keep quiet. So I'm not in the
You know,
box.
the really unnerving part about it all is, Katie, we're in those 3 boxes the whole night. You just can't see them all the time.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, the whole night, we're in those little
Little
boxes.
okay.
If
There we
you
go.
speak, then
If
in the
you're
box,
on the
yeah.
Zoom thing.
Yeah.
It's like an unfortunate hybrid of like the city hall thing and our old bike commission things, because we're incentivized to be as casual as we were. The bike commission used to meet in here.
Oh,
And we would
I
do
know
what we do. We wouldn't have to turn on our microphones. We would just cut each other off and
Uh-huh,
talk for back and
uh-huh,
forth,
uh-huh.
and it was really fun. And you'd have this kind of public comment as opposed to somebody coming up to the microphone.
Yep, yeah.
But we weren't on camera.
That was way more like the library commission.
We weren't on
Mhm.
camera. And now we
Right. So
are.
now you're on camera. So,
We forgot we were until we saw the boxes. Wait a second. All right, so we're moving on to G, on the agenda, agenda item G, which is informational items, and under informational items, city staff provides an update on matters of importance to the commission. Informational items are not action items, however, a commissioner, city staff member, or a member of the public may request to make a comment or ask a question on any of the informational items. The one informational item tonight is update on major project status. Kevin, would you like to provide an update?
Yeah, absolutely. So I have a total of 5 project updates I want to provide here. I'm going to save middle last because I do want to elaborate on that a little bit. So first and foremost, the quiet zone study. Some of you probably know exactly who it is already. Just to remind the commission that we do anticipate to at least conduct some outreach early next year. And the outreach would be on basically design alternatives. So definitely want to stay tuned for those if you're interested in the topic. Obviously, I'll share those dates with the commission whenever they are set and available. So that's for the quiet zone.
I don't think I know what that means.
Oh, the quiet zone study? Yeah, so you know how we have 4 crossings, right? We have
Oh,
for the train,
related
for
to
the quiet
that.
train,
Okay.
right? So it's a study about what can we do from a
Yes.
design standpoint and improvement standpoint so that the trains that pass those crossings don't honk, which is a very
Oh,
not a great way if you're working from home or overnight.
okay, interesting. Thank you
Yeah,
for the
so-
clarification.
It's super fun if you're 6.
Yeah, oh, yeah, okay.
That's true. I do see some kids. Just go,
Right?
So like I mentioned earlier, the local safety plan, we are moving forward with that. So just a couple of things I want to highlight, obviously, is in addition to kind of anticipating next year to be the year that we kind of complete the plan, one of the things that we're going to do is establish a stakeholder group to kind of guide the process from a technical standpoint, but also from an outreach standpoint. So we're currently trying to kind of frame that stakeholder group, and most likely we'll be asking one of the commissioners to be part of that stakeholder group. So that way, we can have someone on the inside, so to speak. And then also report back to this commission whenever it's necessary. So
Excellent.
couch and grade separation, we also kind of anticipate some outreach for early next year. We're going to go to the city council with some design alternative for fully elevated option. So this, if you recall, this is the one item that explicitly required or asked by the city council. So we do anticipate to go to them early next year with some design alternatives for that particular option, which is the fully elevated option.
Wow,
Or thanks.
wow.
Also for shuttle program, we do have an we have an RFP that will be going out to evaluate our shuttle program. So we are one of the few cities within the county that have our own shuttle program. So it'll be very exciting study. If you love the shuttles, that's probably one to follow as well.
To look and see whether it's effective.
Right, kind of how
assess it.
the shuttle's going, what are some ways that we can make it better? Essentially, is what it is. Yeah. Finally, Middle Avenue. So as many of you know, a lot of effort went into that last year or this year.
It was this year.
Yeah. My mind's kind of jumping 2023 already.
That was
We-
probably last year also.
well, yeah.
And a couple years before that, yeah.
So very much an expedited timeline, so to speak. So we do anticipate to go back to the city council the second half of January. So and that meeting will essentially be going to the city council for direction on how do we want to move forward in terms of do we want to remove parking on one side or both sides?
Yeah.
If it's going to be a pilot, not a pilot, if it's a pilot,
Sure.
et cetera, et cetera.
All the
Right.
stuff
So,
that, yeah.
right. And there's been some conversation about outreach, what has been done thus far, and obviously what's going to be done for the meeting. So, and I've kind of shared kind of a brief email with the commission, just kind of highlighting what we have done up to kind of the September timeframe, if you will, October timeframe. And then so for the January meeting, what we're anticipating is essentially kind of redoing some of the outreach, the same outreach again, meaning we want to make sure that we send out emails to those email lists to the people that have reached out to us explicitly via CCIN. We also going to do the social media, which I mean, general next door. We're also going to have changeable message signs out on Middle So that way, it's one of those signs that kind of change the wording for you. We're gonna have those out there, kind of start of January, maybe couple weeks before the actual meeting. So that way, set them out there, people driving up and down there, will be able to see them, and it'll display the meeting date, time. And also, we always have a website that we can encourage people to go on there, because that's where we update all the information. So
Is, on the website, is there a single place where you can see all the feedback to date? A single, like summarized, like, or raw data, or?
yes,
Because I went to the middle, I couldn't, because I read that comment, I go,
Yeah.
well, geez, what has been the feedback? And I couldn't, and I'm just wondering, it's back to this communication and data. I'm just wondering if we summarized the data that already has been collected in a simple way to digest or cut.
Yeah.
That would help serve the community overall, whether it's done this time or another one, somehow easy to digest, to just see what the information has been collected so far. Because I couldn't find it on the website. I probably looked in the wrong place.
Yeah, well, also not the easiest to navigate sometimes, but I would say, a majority of the comment that we receive and sort of dissect it would be kind of the beginning period of the year, where we had a survey,
Sure.
where we let people know our email, and I think we had kind of a staff report that we put together that kind of summarized,
Yes.
but then the raw data,
But it's all
literally.
in minutes, and it's all
So-
deeply buried.
Yeah.
I'm just
Yeah.
thinking, and it's not a criticism.
No,
Because I've come to,
absolutely.
it's just the idea that those guys collecting and managing the data yourself are probably not, it's like, maybe there'll be somebody else like, look, this might be a better way to, make it easy to consume by the community, because there was what I saw, there was a lot of information collected.
Yeah.
But
Yeah,
it's nowhere you can, as a community
No.
member, like my neighbor, I said, well, what's going on with Middle? And I said, well, here's a link. He said, I don't see the data.
Right, yeah.
So-
You can always
so-
kind of.
No, I'm just
It's
wondering if there
actually
might be
kind
a
of
tweak.
Yeah, no, I think it's a good moment to sort of pause and think about what Brian's saying, because I think that prior to being on any of those city commissions or participating in this way at all, as average citizen or something, I used to find the idea that you were looking for information by going to a particular meeting minutes, if you wanted to know more about it, to be really challenging, because I was like, wait, what meeting was it at? And like, what was it discussed? Oh, then I have to click on the staff report and then. And for us now, that that's my status quo in my head. I'm like, oh yeah, that's how it's done. But I think for a lot of people, it's just not naturally where they would go to think they would find something. And so I like what he's saying, which is, I think most people at this point with Google and Amazon and blah, 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 right? Think, oh,
You can
if
say
I
that.
want to see the data, I'll just go to the website and there's gonna be a thing saying, see the data. I'm gonna click on it and there it will be. And I think it's a really excellent point, because we want to make sure the public does know how much was done and what we did learn. And there was a lot of work invested. And also it's kind of a way to start the conversation in an informed, data-informed way from the beginning.
Yeah.
That's
Um,
true.
One of the reasons I forwarded that article to Kevin from the Almanac was that I feel like one of the wonderful things this commission does, like in our meetings when we take public comment, but just in general, being members of the community, is interacting with people and providing information, sort of being ambassadors of, the data that is collected and what it said, and being ambassadors of the efforts that the staff makes, and informing people about it. I was just super surprised that after all that was being done, there was a big headline like, no one talked to anybody. And I was like, gosh. So I do think as commissioners, it's really good to have that role to provide the facts. And I also do really, really support what Brian's saying, which is the city does a lot of work, and maybe there's just one more step, which is
Mhm.
make it really easy for people to see what it is.
Right.
Totally agree. I can't even find stuff. I mean, the old website, you could search by keyword, you could search
Oh,
minutes and agendas.
oh,
So if I
okay.
wanted to find like a rezoning,
Yeah.
right, rezoning and the keyword search, and it wasn't perfect, but you would get it. But now
Sure.
but the new website doesn't even have that. So you'd have to actually know which meeting you were looking
Right.
for.
Who does?
You'd have
No
to
one.
do, literally what I would do is I would go back, I would be like, which meeting was that? And I would be like, well, when did the Almanac write about it? And then I'd go to the
Oh.
Almanac and I'd figure out, oh, it was the October,
Right.
and then but it's, yeah.
90% of people will give up before.
You can't.
Of
No, we're
course.
gonna-
Of
Maybe I'm suggesting
would.
that something a little bit more actionable is that we make that as part of our role as our charter to give you feedback, saying, look, this is part, whether they paint a curb red or not, or intersection stuff, that's a technical thing.
Right.
But we as representatives of the community, perhaps it is within our role, maybe it's one of our subcommittees, just how do we improve, contribute
Mhm.
to the community understanding what's been, because I was really surprised, like, oh my God, that was a great, I mean, I attended a couple of the meetings and I thought there was like, but I'm assuming more can be done, but the other thing is, maybe it's something that we could help be sure it's summarized and communicated in a way that it's easy for the community
Yes.
to digest.
And
And
then-
that'd be a formal role that we do
Mhm,
as kind of like
Mhm.
helping,
mhm, mhm.
helping to communicate.
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, I think,
Because at least I'm a complete dummy on this stuff, so it's gonna be simple for me to get, right?
yeah, no, I think that, and it to makes sense whenever we have a big enough project, we always have its own website, right, for the project. And I think there's probably some way that we can maybe extract that information, because you're right that in terms of, the meeting minutes and meetings, they are available on the project webpage, but
But
that's what they are. They are links to the agenda and the
Right,
meetings.
right.
So maybe see if we can, find a way to maybe pull those summaries into this, or maybe make it very visible that if you're looking for data, here is that meeting or that page that you're looking for.
or
So
drill
that-
down through the data. So
Right.
here's our summary.
Yeah, yeah.
And here's the table behind that data, and here's the data behind that data.
I feel
Right.
like.
Right, so
yeah.
we do
Yeah, I
have,
mean, it's pretty easy, as long as the data is codified.
yeah,
right.
so we do have, like, I think one of the staff report, we did summarize the data in terms of,
You did.
percentages, et cetera,
Yeah,
and we
did.
have the link to the actual, what
Mhm.
people actually say to kind of make that
Mhm,
correlation if
mhm.
somebody wants to. Yeah.
And I'm suggesting that's just a great not marketing, but it's a great way for you guys to communicate to the community what has been done.
Yes.
Because there was a lot of good stuff.
Right,
Actually,
yeah.
I feel like even,
Highlighting that.
I remember being frustrated when y'all were presenting this to city council because you gave us another layer of data that you didn't give city council. I think.
I think, yes, we got another layer when we were getting
did,
ready
we
for our
did.
May and July.
And I,
meetings,
and,
yeah.
and I think council has a lot of reading to do, but I think staff were getting asked by council to do work they'd already done.
Yeah, yeah.
And I
There was
remember-
definitely an
I
understanding.
remember
gap.
sitting there being like, I think,
Yeah,
right, like,
sure.
I think,
I
I think
know.
Councilmember Mueller might have said, did anybody talk to the residents of Middle Avenue? And I'm like,
Right.
yes. And I can tell you the percentages.
Yes, yes.
But,
yes.
but that wasn't, somehow that layer wasn't there in that council report. And y'all are in the hot seat, so it's not like you can say.
Yeah, yeah,
"Well,
I,
actually."
yeah, I think there's a lot of really important things being said, but getting it down to sort of how does the process change for us to support the staff on this? I'm wondering if, you blurred this out for a second, but I'm wondering if this is almost like a subcommittee of a couple of us who really care about this, who can kind of get a bit more involved and kick the tires on some of these websites as they're created and have almost like a editorial review or sort of a whatever.
I mean, we don't want to be a bottleneck.
No, not at all. But maybe like be able to, well, we can even go back to Middle Avenue as like a straw man, like a potential example of where there was opportunity to provide more data or make it more easily available. Go back and kind of give, here's exactly what our recommendations would have been. And I know there's someone who's head of communications for the city. I mean, does that person maybe want to come and have a conversation?
Like,
So
is it a
we
clay
can-
thing?
We can talk about this.
Well,
Is that
I
who it
mean,
is?
well, so Clay is the person that I think you're hinting at. I think, at this point, it's more a matter of like, if you don't know the project, then it's kind of hard for you to not know the project, but really I think the point is more about just bringing awareness to the project. I think if you know the project at this moment in time, you express your opinion and it's very well documented. So the outreach is more, not necessarily about what's being recommended, but more just, well, absolutely that too. I think the number one point is to make sure that if you don't know the project, that we get to you so that you know. that the
Actually,
project
that's not,
exists.
I don't think that's what we were trying to say at all.
Yeah.
I think what we're trying to say is you all have done a ton of research
Mhm.
that you're burying in staff reports.
That
and
too,
needs-
that
and
point,
And that
yes.
you have a project webpage, which
Yep.
I can find. If I type Middle Avenue
Yes.
Streets Project, I'll land on middleport.gov.
Yep.
But what I won't do is be able to click on a link that says
Here's
staff
the
survey,
summary.
staff survey
Yep.
summary, staff survey.
Right.
Data.
Yeah.
That can show people, oh, they actually surveyed 600 people.
Right.
Including.
People
You
on the
know,
road, people off the
Yeah,
road.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
And-
right.
and-
People
and-
said this on 1 lane, 2 lanes. Yeah, it was
So,
pretty
I mean,
granular.
you've done the work. It's more just pulling it out of
Pulling
the
it
staff
out.
reporter
Yeah.
minutes
Right.
and giving it its own link.
Because
And just
there's
having a-
lots of vested
Yeah.
parties that want to know about it, but they may not have followed it from A to Z and are jumping in at L
Mhm.
and want to know what happened prior, and they're not
Mhm.
having access to everything that's been done
And
Yeah.
for the
Mhm.
press
in an
too,
easy
like,
fashion.
At the press too, as well.
Yeah.
And, you know, in some ways, this actually might save you work.
yes,
Right.
it would.
So you don't have to redo.
Yeah.
It's, you know, it's like, well, it's, you know, maybe it's a role that we can help just be a sounding
Yeah.
board for.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean,
No,
the
I
other,
mean,
the
yeah.
other thing, it establishes the conversation in a factual way. And that's what was really bothering me is like, it closes, it narrows the opportunity for an article we published saying they didn't do anything that was new about it. 'Cause it's like, well,
That was the
actually,
tone. That was definitely the tone of that.
yeah. And it's not reflective of what happened, but also it was just a better conversation. It was a better process than that. And I would want people in Menlo Park to know
You know,
that.
what'd be
So,
awesome is you have like a map of the city. And you could click on a spot on the map. And like, oh, Middle Avenue, right? Like, where's Middle Avenue? And you could click there, and it would pop up, and then
There's
all the
another button.
things related to that project would be linked there. Right, almost like that act site where you can like
yep,
report things that are going wrong.
yeah,
Or like
Yeah.
graffiti or whatever, it'd be like if you could marry those two so that I could say like, hey, the stoplight at Rogel and El Camino isn't working, and that it would like, that would route, that feedback would somehow route through the same system you're using to inform people about what happens.
now we're really adding to the.
Sorry.
But I do agree with you that would.
That's a good point. I think,
But
But
we're
the-
migrating off the agenda.
Yeah.
Sorry.
It's all right.
yeah, I think first, just kind of put a pin to this. I think
Yeah.
what Brian mentioned is absolutely correct in terms of, you know, the data is there, it is on the web page, but you have to click multiple clicks, scroll to page X of.
And it
X,
doesn't say
Y.
you're finding the data, it says.
Right,
connected
so
agendas.
perhaps there's a better way
Yeah.
for us to see
Sure.
how we can highlight where the data is or extract it so that it's
Yes.
easier to
And,
access.
and let us be a kind of
Right.
a point of review of that for you, so that you don't have to, you know, it's like we can, I think that, I feel a lot more comfortable about that as a role,
Mhm.
rather than trying to advise about whether this intersection should be raised or not, because that's a technical
Right, it's more
thing.
about the
But
outreach.
helping to reach the
Yeah.
community is something I think that we
Yeah.
definitely could provide.
No, definitely. Yeah.
Completely agree.
Okay, great. This is a great group of people who really want to help in ways that matter and.
And I
that's
think like elevating
pretty
this to play, like I saw some chatter on Nextdoor recently about downtown, and like council's not doing anything about downtown. And again, you would never know because it's just somewhere in an agenda, but I feel like they talk about downtown every single meeting. It's just
Yeah.
somewhere buried, you know, so.
Yeah,
But it's a-
Actually adding.
there's a
keyword search-
communications problem.
Yeah.
You got people interested,
Yeah.
plus you got the data, so it's just.
Yeah, Yeah.
No, exactly.
yeah. Okay, well, Kevin, thank you. We're going to move on to committee, subcommittee reports. Does any subcommittees want to make a report or update? No, I don't hear any.
I have one question, sorry, it's,
Please go.
and I'm just gonna put it out there, but not, hope we don't have a big conversation. I heard there was a hit and run with a crossing guard today at Ringwood and Edge. I read this on, yeah, by Laura
Yeah.
Laurel.
Yeah.
Which
Wow.
if it's the crossing guard I'm thinking about is, I mean, extra sad.
Oh,
So I
no.
just wanted to elevate that to staff so that you can run that up the flagpole and figure out what's going on.
Okay.
I'm sure there's been a police, I'm imagining there's been a police report, but it's one of those things you just read about on Nextdoor and you're like, whoa.
Yeah. Okay,
So
Yeah.
feeding that
you.
information, connecting the dots for the task force and the people who are working on the, yeah,
all right then.
maybe we'll talk about it tomorrow.
Thank you, Commissioner Brinson, for bringing that up. If there are no other reports or updates, I am going to adjourn the meeting at 9:03 PM. Thank everyone for coming as always and your time and service to the city. Good conversation tonight. Thank you.
Thanks. Good night.
Thanks.